Chapter 2473. Sword Rain. Ji Tianxing pointed his sword at the sky and shouted coldly. In the next instant, tens of thousands of star swords descended from the sky. The four injured silver armor captains looked up at the meteor-like swords and felt a chill run down their spines. Their eyes were filled with despair. An extremely heavy force suppressed them, giving them no chance to escape. At this critical moment, they could only use their last bit of strength to resist with all their might. Boom, 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 boom. The star swords covered a radius of hundreds of miles and produced earth-shattering sounds. The stars were dazzling, and dust filled the sky. The loud sounds were endless, and the ground within thousands of miles was trembling. The four silver-armored captains endured the attacks of countless star swords and were quickly reduced to ashes. 10 seconds later, when all the star swords dissipated, the four captains also ceased to exist. Without any hesitation, Ji Tianxing rushed into the underground cave as fast as a bolt of lightning. The two divine arrays protecting the cave had already been damaged to varying degrees and were not far from being destroyed. Fortunately, the interior of the cave was still intact, and Yunyao was safe. Ji Tianxing hurriedly opened the sword world and put the sleeping Yunyao inside. Only then could Yunyao be considered safe. He turned and left the cave, crossing the sky and flying toward the ancient viewing platform. Dozens of seconds later, Ji Tianxing arrived near the ancient viewing platform. He was still hundreds of miles away, but he could already see the colorful divine light in the distant sky covering thousands of miles. A few figures were flickering in and out of the divine light, shuttling back and forth. Among the three people closest to him, one was a tall and burly elder in a black robe. He was the messenger of the divine ruins. As for the other two, one was the ferocious-looking General Dragon Fu, who was as large as a mountain. There was also a bald man from the demon race. He was the great demon sage, Ling Xian, whose appearance had changed greatly. General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian were attacking the messenger of the divine ruins. From the looks of it, the messenger of the divine ruins was at a disadvantage. He was covered in injuries and bloodstains, looking somewhat pathetic. The dragon-subduing general and Ling Xian had the upper hand, but it wasn't easy for them. Both of them had suffered heavy injuries, especially Ling Xian's injuries. In the short term, it would be difficult to determine the victor between the two sides. It wasn't an easy task for General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian to kill the emissary of the divine ruins. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned, revealing a deep sense of doubt. Why is General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian together? Join forces to deal with the old man of the godly ruins? In a short 2 months, how did Ling Xian break through the deity realm and become a fiend celestial? Ling Xian's divine soul aura was actually very similar to the ancestral devil gods. Could it be that Ling Xian had rescued the ancestral demon god and seized the opportunity when the ancestral demon god was on the brink of death to steal the ancestral demon god's soul? Moreover, after Ling Xian became a demon god, he joined the dragon subduing general. In a short moment, Ji Tianxing analyzed the answer. In his opinion, this was the only explanation that made sense. However, he still felt that this was too absurd. Ling Xian was the ancestral demon god's most trusted and most valued great fiend celestial, but in the end, he betrayed the ancestral demon god when he was on the brink of death. After that, Ling Xian turned around and joined the dragon subduing general, making the fiend celestial race a vassal of the heaven punisher race. If the ancestral demon god was still alive, he would probably explode from anger even if he didn't die, right? Ji Tianxing thought to himself, the corners of his mouth curled up in a contemptuous sneer. He looked at the sky, thousands of miles away, even further away. There, several captains in silver armor were desperately besieging a white-haired woman. Ji Tianxing's gaze immediately fell on the white-haired woman, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. Of course, he could recognize that the white-haired woman was the assassin who had attacked him previously. Before Luo Shui died, He had revealed the true identity of the white-haired woman. It was actually his master, Fairy Yuqing. Now, Fairy Yuqing was besieged by several captains of the Heaven Punisher race. Her injuries were very miserable, and she was in a precarious situation. Ji Tianxing could not help but think to himself, if Fairy Yuqing is willing to help Luo Shui stall for time, it means that she also knows of Luo Shui's plan. However, Luo Shui reined in the horse at the edge of the cliff and sacrificed himself. It has already been a few days, so Fairy Yuqing must know. But she actually doesn't blame me and doesn't seek revenge? Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing did not hesitate to fly over and help Fairy Yuqing. Swoosh! He arrived near the battlefield and appeared behind a silver-armored captain in a flash. Before the captain could react, he waved his sword and stabbed out 7 cold beams. Swish! 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 7 dazzling sword beams enveloped the captain like a bright moon. With a muffled bang, the captain was stabbed by the sword beams. His armor and body collapsed at the same time, exploding into a rain of blood. This sudden scene not only frightened the other captains, but also stunned Fairy Yuqing. When she saw that the person who attacked was Ji Tianxing, she also revealed a trace of surprise, and her eyes became complicated. At this moment, the other captains came back to their senses and waved their long sabers and swords, surrounding Ji Tianxing. The pressure on Fairy Yuqing was greatly reduced. She hurriedly took out a few pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. Ji Tianxing used the Big Dipper Nebula steps and held the Burial of Heaven sword as he fought with the captains. The divine sword danced, constantly stabbing out dazzling sword beams. His left palm flew up and down, constantly striking out palm shadows and dragon claws that blotted out the sky, sending the captains flying one after another. In the dark, the god-slaying flying dagger remained invisible, lurking in the void, ready to launch a fatal attack at any time. Bang! 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 Swish! Swish! Loud sounds kept erupting, and the colorful sword beams and palm shadows covered hundreds of miles of the sky. In a short span of 10 breaths, 3 captains had been killed by the Heaven Burier sword, their bodies smashed into pieces. 2 other captains were smashed into meat paste by the heaven-capturing dragon claws and shattered into countless pieces. At this point, the 6 captains who besieged Fairy Yuqing were all killed by Ji Tianxing. Before Ji Tianxing arrived, Fairy Yuqing had already killed 2 captains. All 8 captains were dead, and the battle was over. Ji Tianxing held the Burial of Heaven sword and flew to stand in front of Fairy Yuqing. Fairy Yuqing looked at him with a calm expression and asked, "I attacked you before, but you didn't care about the past and even helped me out?" Ji Tianxing looked at her with a complicated gaze and said in a low voice, "Senior, Luo Shui has already told me the truth." Fairy Yuqing nodded slightly and asked again. She couldn't get over herself and chose to sacrifice herself, right? Ji Tianxing nodded silently with a bitter look on his face. Fairy Yuqing forced a smile and comforted. "You don't have to blame yourself. We should all respect her choice. Don't just stand there. The old man can't hold on any longer. We have to help him." With that, she flew towards the messenger of the ruins of God. Ji Tianxing also collected his thoughts and followed with the Burial of Heaven sword. End of chapter. Chapter 2474. Dragon Fighting in the Wild. General Dragon Subduing roared as he waved his huge palms and sent out 2 balls of dark red light toward the messenger of the divine ruins. The 2 black dragons on his shoulders also opened their huge mouths and let out a high-pitched roar. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 2 black dragons emitted endless black light and formed 2 black dragon shadows that chased after the 2 balls of bloody light toward the messenger of the divine ruins. Black Sun Hurricane. At the same time, Ling Xian also roared as he waved his palms and released an earth-shattering black hurricane. Whoosh! Whoosh! The black hurricane turned into 900-mile-tall tornadoes that surged toward the messenger of the divine ruins from all directions and sealed off the surrounding area. This area immediately became chaotic. Facing the combined attack of two strong cultivators, the messenger of the divine ruins remained calm and used his divine power to activate the power of the black robe. Whoosh! The black robe he was wearing suddenly lit up with a dazzling golden light that formed a huge shield. Bam! 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 The two balls of bloody light and the two black dragon shadows slammed into the golden shield with a deafening sound. The bloody light exploded and the black dragon shadows also shattered and dissipated in the sky. However, a crack appeared on the golden light barrier, and golden light shards burst out from it. Naturally, another tear appeared on the black robe, and shreds of cloth fluttered in the wind. The messenger of the divine ruins' body shook as he hurriedly used his divine power to repair the crack on the shield. However, right at this moment, 9 sky-piercing hurricanes descended upon him, enveloping him and ruthlessly crushing him. The black tornado revolved at an extremely high speed, grinding and rubbing against the golden light shield, uttering cracking noises. As the tornado collapsed and shattered, the golden light shield also shattered inch by inch, turning into golden light fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Finally, when the golden shield collapsed, there were still 4 black tornadoes left. Whoosh! 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 The black tornadoes engulfed the messenger of the divine ruins and spun rapidly, trying to kill him. Seeing this, General Dragon, subduing, and Ling Xian heaved a sigh of relief. This was especially true of General Dragon Fu, whose eyes were filled with disdain as he sneered. The guardian of the ancient ruins and the strongest person on the Shenwu continent? Ha ha! It's nothing more than that. You will all be annihilated by my hands. I'm the strongest person in this world, the future ruler. Soon, the power of the 4 black tornadoes was exhausted, and they gradually dissipated. Shwa! The emissary of the divine ruins flew out of the black light fragment and staggered back into the sky. His appearance became even more miserable and disheveled. His black robe was full of holes, with more than a dozen pieces of cloth fluttering in the wind. Even the black cloak he was wearing was torn to shreds by the hurricane. Without the cover of the cloak, he revealed his true appearance. A wrinkled, bronze-skinned face appeared before everyone's eyes. His face was old but resolute, filled with a firm and unyielding expression. On his square face, there was a pair of thick eyebrows that were like dragons, and a pair of turbid eyes that were filled with wisdom and calmness. This was a face that was dignified without being angry, causing others to feel deep veneration. But the most eye-catching thing was that on the emissary of the divine ruins' forehead, there was a special diamond-shaped mark that was faintly discernible under a few strands of white hair. Suddenly seeing that strange-looking imprint, General Dragon, subduing, frowned. Ling Xian was also stunned and let out a cry of disbelief. Heavens! You're actually not human. Indeed, the emissary of the divine ruins' appearance and body shape were no different from a human's. He had always been wearing a large black robe and a large cloak, which concealed his true appearance. As a result, no one in the world had ever seen his true appearance. Everyone thought that the emissary of the divine ruins was the martial god of the human race, the most mysterious human powerhouse. But now, his cloak had been destroyed and his true appearance had been revealed. Only then did everyone discover this secret. At this time, Fairy Yuqing rushed over with Ji Tianxing and arrived behind General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian. The two of them were about to attack General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian when they were stunned by the scene in front of them. Both of them were stunned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with shock and astonishment, especially Fairy Yuqing. This scene had the greatest impact on her. She had always thought that she was the only one in the world who understood the emissary of the divine ruins the best. But now, she realized that she was wrong. She didn't understand the emissary of the divine ruins at all. She was even kept in the dark about whether the other party was a human or a foreign race. A strong sense of unfamiliarity rose from the bottom of her heart. Ji Tianxing frowned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins, staring at the diamond-shaped mark on his forehead. For some reason, his long-dormant divine soul memories became blurred and chaotic again. His consciousness was temporarily in a trance and overlapped, and many strange and bizarre images appeared in his mind, especially that strange diamond-shaped mark, which flashed through his mind more than 30 times in a single thought. There were golden ones, dark red ones, purple ones, blue ones, white ones, and even black ones. They were all diamond-shaped marks of various colors, and there were some changes on the marks, which made them even more mysterious. The sudden change caused a strong thought to emerge in Ji Tianxing's mind. I've seen this strange diamond-shaped mark somewhere before. Also, I should be very familiar with it. I've seen many different color marks. What race is the person who has this kind of mark? He vaguely remembered some fragmented images, but he couldn't remember what they were. His divine soul memories kept surging, but it was difficult for a complete memory fragment to appear. Ji Tianxing knew very well that the divine soul memories of his previous life had yet to be fully awakened. There were even more secrets hidden in the depths of his divine soul memories, waiting for him to unearth and unravel them. At this moment, General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came back to their senses. Their attention shifted from the emissary of the divine ruins and focused on Ji Tianxing. TSK, TSK. Ji Tianxing, you've indeed appeared. General Dragon Fu looked at him with a burning gaze, and a bloodthirsty sneer appeared on his face. Ling Xian also revealed a mocking sneer and said to Ji Tianxing, Ji Tianxing, how have you been? Speaking of which, I still have to thank you properly. If you didn't severely injure the ancestor fiend god, how would I have the chance to replace it and become the new fiend god? General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came here to kill Ji Tianxing and Luo Shui. Now that Ji Tianxing had appeared, the two of them naturally had to get down to business and didn't want to be entangled with the emissary of the divine ruins. After Ji Tianxing heard Ling Xian's words, he sneered with contempt. I didn't guess wrongly. The ancestor fiend god saw you as his right-hand man, but in the end he was betrayed by you and his divine soul was taken over by you. The despicableness and savagery of the fiend god race are indeed of the same origin. Ling Xian was mocked by him, but he didn't feel embarrassed or angry. He smiled and said, as the saying goes, the winner takes all. I was able to take over the ancestor fiend god's power and replace it to become the new fiend god. That means that my scheming and methods are above it, and I'm more suitable to be the leader of the fiend god race. Old Tai, set a small goal, first carrot, remember, new 8th Chinese Networko. Chapter 2475. Ling Xian's smug look made Ji Tianxing feel even more nauseous. He looked at Ling Xian from the corner of his eyes and said expressionlessly, the ancestor fiend celestial is an ancient great fiend celestial and was once the death god that struck fear in the hearts of the 100 races. Although I hate it and want to kill it, I have to admit that it is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime fiend celestial. At least, it will never submit to others and will not let the entire fiend celestial race become the vassals and slaves of other races. Ling Xian heard the sarcasm in Ji Tianxing's words and sneered disapprovingly. Ji Tianxing, no matter how strong a person is, he is still a cold corpse. Only the living have the right to talk about strength of character and dignity. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Now that the heaven punishers have swept the world and no one can stop them, General Dragon Subduing is the most majestic tree. Only by following in the footsteps of General Dragon Subduing can the fiend celestial race rule the world and be above the 100 races. And you and your fellow humans will suffer heavy casualties and become the slaves of the heaven punishers. Of course, you won't be able to see this, because today you're going to die and be buried here. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. You have already explained very clearly what it means to be a dog relying on its master's power. Do you think that you have nothing to worry about and have a bright future just because you have General Dragon Subduing? Ha! Who knows if today is the day you die and this place is not your burial ground? Ling Xian frowned fiercely, and his eyes shone with a fierce light. He said in a venomous tone, "It's useless to argue. I will kill you now." As he said that, Ling Xian raised the pitch-black demonic blade in his hand and activated the power of calamity, condensing a pitch-black blade light on the demonic blade. Fairy Yuqing stepped out and said to Ji Tianxing behind her, "Ji Tianxing, help the old man kill General Dragon Subduing. Leave this clown to me." Fairy Yuqing was about to activate the Sea God Shield and kill Ling Xian. General Dragon Subduing frowned and shouted coldly, "Today's matter is between Ji Tianxing and me. You two old things, if you back down now, I won't make things difficult for you." Suddenly hearing these words, everyone's expression changed slightly, and a wisp of light flashed in their eyes. This was especially true for Ling Xian. While his face was filled with astonishment, he thought to himself, "That's not right." The dragon-subduing general had always been overbearing. Given his usual style, he would definitely kill all of them. But he actually took the initiative to concede? Could it be that General Fu Long admits that he is no match for Ji Tianxing, Fairy Yuqing, and the emissary of the ruins of God? At this moment, Fairy Yuqing sneered, "Huh, the dignified leader of the heaven-punishing race is afraid? What a joke. Weren't you acting all high and mighty before, and even wanted to kill this old woman's disciple, Luo Shui? Why don't you want to be my enemy now?" General Dragon Fu looked at her coldly and said in a low voice, "Since Luo Shui is dead, my only enemy left is Ji Tianxing. This matter has nothing to do with you." Fairy Yuqing straightened her wide sleeves and said slowly, "Nothing to do with it? Ji Tianxing and this old woman's disciple, Luo Shui, are best friends. If you want to kill Ji Tianxing, how can this old woman sit by and do nothing?" At this moment, the emissary of the ruins of God had already suppressed his injuries and took out a bronze mask to wear on his face. His voice was as low as muffled thunder, and he said in a dignified tone, "General Dragon Fu, put away your clumsy plan. You want to kill Ji Tianxing first, then deal with this old man and Fairy Yuqing? Ha ha! The people of the Shinwu continent are not that stupid. This old man and Fairy Yuqing are definitely not people who are afraid of death. Today, let's settle this here and now." The emissary of the ruins of God's words not only exposed General Dragon Fu's scheme, but also completely shattered his fantasies. General Dragon Fu knew that this matter would not be resolved peacefully, so he did not waste any more words. He smiled nastily and said, "Very well. Since you are so eager to die, then I will fulfill your wish." The moment he finished speaking, General Dragon, Subduing, slowly took out a thick and wide blood blade and swung it towards Ji Tianxing. Slaughter of the heavens. The huge blood blade that was 100 meters long lit up with a dazzling blood-red light, and thousands of mysterious images and symbols appeared on the blade. Swish, swish, swish. The blood blade instantly slashed out 4 huge blood-red blades that could split the heavens and earth apart, ruthlessly slashing toward Ji Tianxing. The blades were extremely sharp and carried a murderous aura that could shake one's soul. However, the most powerful thing that Ji Tianxing feared the most was the formless power that descended from the heavens. That was the essence of the Heaven Punisher's power. It could not be seen or touched, but it was as terrifying as the heavens and earth, making it difficult for one to even think of resisting. Ji Tianxing's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. General Dragon Fu was the strongest enemy he had ever faced in his life. He stared at the 4 blood-red blades and gripped the sword of burial of heaven tightly with both hands, exploding with 100% of his divine power. Sword piercing the heavens. With a furious roar, he held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and ruthlessly stabbed out a 1,000-meter-long divine sword light that pierced the heavens from below. Boom! Crack! The huge divine sword went against the formless suppressive power and went against the current, hitting one of the blood-red blades with a loud boom. With a deafening, shattering sound, the blood-red blade shattered into pieces and scattered in the sky. Then, the huge divine sword, which had used up almost half of its power, ruthlessly stabbed the second blood-red blade. Boom, boom, boom. The second blood-red blade also collapsed. However, the huge divine sword's power had been used up and had also shattered. However, General Dragon Fu still had two more blood-red blades that slashed toward Ji Tianxing with undiminished power. He had no time to counterattack and could only use his divine body to resist. At this critical moment, the messenger of the divine ruins brazenly attacked. Sky sea parting light, sun and moon shine together. The messenger of the divine ruins shouted in a solemn tone. His palms separated and interlocked, shooting out endless rainbow divine light that respectively struck the two blood-red blades. Boom! The rainbow divine light suddenly exploded, turning into billions of dazzling fragments that covered the sky. The two blood-red blades also shattered, turning into specks of blood-red light that dissipated in the sky. Ji Tianxing and the messenger of the divine ruins worked together to neutralize General Dragon Fu's divine power. General Dragon Fu was not surprised by this. In fact, he had already expected it. His expression did not change as he waved his blood-red blade again, piercing out blood-red light that filled the sky toward Ji Tianxing. His mountain-like body also released a vast and formless power that pressed down like the collapse of the heavens. Ji Tianxing and the messenger of the divine ruins did not dare to relax. They both used their divine powers with all their might to block and counterattack. At the same time, Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian also started fighting. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand in the sky. Originally, Ling Xian only wanted to join forces with General Dragon Fu to kill Ji Tianxing as soon as possible and then retreat. But as soon as he attacked, he was stopped by Fairy Yuqing. No matter how he tried to break out and dodge, he could not escape from Fairy Yuqing's entanglement. In his rage, he could only give up on attacking Ji Tianxing and decided to deal with Fairy Yuqing first. Chapter 2476. Boom, 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 boom. Deafening noises exploded in the sky, reverberating endlessly. The five martial gods had all used their divine abilities and secret techniques, and it was difficult to tell who would win. Dazzling rainbow divine light illuminated a radius of 5,000 kilometers, making this area look like a divine realm. Layer after layer of divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples, sweeping through heaven and earth. All the mountain ranges and peaks within a radius of 5,000 kilometers were razed to the ground. The ground had turned into ruins, filled with deep pits and ravines. It was a complete mess. This was a great battle that could destroy heaven and earth. Fortunately, it had happened in the depths of the ruins of God. No matter how much damage it caused, it would not harm the innocent people. At the same time, no one could get close to watch the battle. Otherwise, if this matter were spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the Shenwu continent. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The five powerhouses were divided into two groups, and they had already exchanged tens of thousands of blows. The battlefield had also shifted 30,000 kilometers. Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian were still unable to determine a victor, and the battle was very anxious. Both of them were exhausted and in a sorry state. Their bodies were covered in wounds and bloodstains, and they looked like two bloody men. Originally, Fairy Yuqing was a martial god who had been famous for thousands of years, and her strength was extremely strong. Ling Xian had just broken through to the deity realm, and his foundation was still shallow. Logically speaking, it should be easy for Fairy Yuqing to defeat Ling Xian. However, Fairy Yuqing had been injured twice in a row, and her injuries had already worsened. She only had about 40% of her strength left. Ling Xian was weaker, but he had inherited the ancestral god fiend's sky fiend physique, and he had abnormal defense and recovery abilities. Even if his body was covered in bloody holes and wounds, and dozens of demon bones and internal organs could be clearly seen, he could still hold on. On the other side, Ji Tianxing and the messenger of the ruins of God were still desperately attacking General Dragon Subduing. Unfortunately, both sides were equally matched, or rather, It would be more appropriate to say that both sides would suffer. General Dragon Subduing's huge body was covered in hundreds of wounds that crisscrossed, and blood flowed out. Even the black dragon on his left shoulder had its neck severed by Ji Tianxing's god-slaying flying dagger. As for the emissary of the divine ruins and Ji Tianxing's injuries, they were also tragic and had severely weakened their battle prowess. Finally, the power of the emissary of the divine ruins became weaker and weaker, and he could not hold on any longer. He hesitated for a moment before sending a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing. "Kid, it's not a good idea for us to be in a stalemate like this. It's very likely that we'll exhaust our god power and fall into a passive state. The dragon subduing general still has reinforcements, but we don't. We can't die together with him." Ji Tianxing cast his arts to fend off General Dragon Subduing's attacks while sending a voice transmission. "Thank you for your reminder, Senior. I had the same intention as well. Why don't I hold off General Dragon Subduing while you assist Fairy Yuqing to get rid of Ling Xian first? Ling Xian's strength is weaker. He could be used as a breakthrough." The emissary of the divine ruins' turbid eyes flashed as he hurriedly nodded in agreement. "That's a good idea. However, you are better at restraining demons than this old man. Therefore, I will hold off General Dragon Subduing while you go and kill Ling Xian." Ji Tianxing was a little hesitant as he asked in a worried tone, "Can you hold on?" The emissary of the divine ruins answered without hesitation, "Definitely within half an hour." Ji Tianxing no longer hesitated as he nodded. "All right, then be careful." With that, he made a feint at General Dragon Subduing and retreated hundreds of miles away. After shaking off General Dragon Subduing, he flew across the sky at lightning speed and hurried towards the battlefield 2,000 miles away. There, Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian were still fighting to the death. Neither of them was willing to back down. Ji Tianxing maintained his invisible state and silently arrived at the battlefield. He lay dormant for a few breaths of time before he found an opportunity to strike. He decisively took out the god-slaying flying dagger. Swoosh! The 3-inch flying dagger cut through the sky and lit up with a dazzling golden light as it ruthlessly pierced towards Ling Xian's back. Ling Xian immediately sensed the danger. His pupils constricted as he used his teleportation skill without even turning his head to dodge the flying dagger. But at this moment, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed coldly as he brazenly attacked. "This is the moment I've been waiting for." Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He abruptly raised his fists and recklessly punched at the empty sky 100 miles in front of him. Kaboom! 2 mountain-like phantoms of dragons and elephants instantly shattered that part of the sky, turning it into a shattered pitch-black void. Violent and devastating shockwaves erupted, mixed with a pitch-black void storm. There was also a figure with a crooked and wretched appearance. That figure was Ling Xian. He had just entered the alternate space and was in the process of teleporting when Ji Tianxing shattered the space and forcefully squeezed him out. The power of the shattering space far surpassed that of a knife or an axe. It directly shattered his internal organs and meridians. Puff! He staggered into the sky and opened his mouth to spit out a large mouthful of blood mixed with many pieces of internal organs. While lifting his sleeve to wipe off the bloodstains on his face, he suddenly raised his head to look at Ji Tianxing and roared with a ferocious expression. "Ji Tianxing, you despicable and shameless villain! How dare you sneak attack me?" Ji Tianxing glanced at him expressionlessly and sneered, "Ha! These words coming from your mouth are really ironic." As his voice fell, he held the sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb with all his strength, fiercely slashing out a blazing white giant sword. God-slaying sword. The heaven-mending orb in his mind spewed out endless divine power, which condensed into a 1,000-meter-long giant divine sword through the sword of Burial of Heaven. Swoosh! The giant divine sword fell from the sky and slashed towards Ling Xian's head with a loud bang. Before the giant sword arrived, the dazzling white light had already illuminated a radius of 3,000 miles, dispelling all the darkness. The terrifying suppressive power sealed an area of 100 miles, causing the space to almost freeze. Ling Xian's body was bent, but he clenched his teeth and held on, recklessly erupting with all his strength. Ji Tianxing, I will never lose to you. Don't even think about it. Fallen devil, darkness indestructible. As his angry roar sounded, his burly body suddenly ignited with purple flames that soared into the sky, emitting endless black, demonic fog. The purple flames and the black fog mixed together and turned into a vortex that was dozens of miles wide, spinning at an extreme speed. This was the ultimate skill that Ling Xian obtained from the ancestral devil god. He had just succeeded in cultivating it not long ago and had not used it yet. He turned himself into the fallen devil Qi. Even if the vortex was destroyed, as long as there was a trace of devil Qi, he could recover again. This was the first time he used this ultimate skill, but it was also the last time. Boom! Amidst the deafening loud noise, the giant divine sword ruthlessly stabbed into the devil Qi vortex. The vortex spun with all its might, and the purple flames flashed wildly, wrapping around the giant divine sword in a futile attempt to dissolve the power of the giant divine sword. However, the vortex and the giant divine sword were only in a deadlock for a moment before quickly disintegrating like snow under the scorching sun. In just 2 short breaths, all the purple flames and fallen devil Qi were purified by the divine light. As a result, Ling Xian also no longer existed, completely dying out. Old Tai, set a small goal, first carat, remember, new 8th Chinese Network O. Chapter 2477. Ling Xian was completely dead. He had just inherited the power and status of the ancestor fiend god and was about to lead the demon race to glory. He had thought that he would be the one laughing in the end. But the truth was the opposite. He had just gone out with General Dragon subduing for the first time and had died under Ji Tianxing's sword. It was too depressing, too surprising. Swoosh! A black stone the size of a fist fell from the sky. This was the boundless divine stone that General Dragon subduing had given to Ling Xian. When Ling Xian and Fairy Yu Qing were fighting, he had used this divine stone several times to resolve fatal dangers. Unfortunately, Ling Xian did not have the chance to use it during the battle with Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out a dazzling golden light, grabbing the boundless divine stone in his palm. He only looked at it twice before putting it into his space ring to study it in the future. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Fairy Yu Qing took out 2 divine pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. She did not waste any time and hurriedly asked Ji Tianxing, "How are the old man? Let's go and help him, otherwise he won't be able to hold on." Ji Tianxing nodded and brought her to the messenger of the divine ruins and General Dragon subduing. When the 2 of them arrived near the battlefield, they saw General Dragon subduing attacking fiercely, forcing the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. In just a few breaths, the messenger of the divine ruins had been stabbed 3 times, and blood spurted out. But he stubbornly held on and fought General Dragon, subduing with all his might. Originally, when Ji Tianxing left the battle, General Dragon subduing chased after him without any regard. The messenger of the divine ruins had used all his skills to stall General Dragon subduing. General Dragon subduing could not escape and was about to kill the messenger of the divine ruins in anger before dealing with Ji Tianxing. But before he could kill the messenger of the divine ruins, Ji Tianxing and Fairy Yu Qing had arrived. Seeing Ji Tianxing and Fairy Yu Qing appear, General Dragon subduing's expression darkened, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Of course, he could guess that Ling Xian was most likely dead. Previously, he had brought Ling Xian, the 12 captains, and dozens of heaven-punishing clan warriors with him. Now, everyone had died in battle, and he was the only one left. The strong sense of defeat caused him to be filled with rage, and he even had the intention to retreat. He had a premonition that this operation was going to fail. With his strength, it was basically impossible for him to defeat Ji Tianxing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yu Qing. This was indeed the case. When Ji Tianxing and Fairy Yu Qing joined the battle, The pressure on General Dragon, subduing, instantly increased. The situation was completely reversed. The dragon's subduing general was besieged by 3 people and immediately fell into a disadvantage. Ji Tianxing's killing intent rose, and he wanted to take the chance to get rid of the dragon subduing general to prevent any future troubles. Therefore, he did not hold back at all and used his strongest killer move. The god-slaying flying knife was also hiding at the side, ready to deal a fatal blow to the dragon subduing general. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist, Rising Sword, boom, 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 boom. Earth-shattering sounds kept erupting, and dazzling divine light bloomed, covering thousands of miles. The 2 sides exchanged over 300 moves, shattering the sky within several thousand li. The ground had also turned into a vast expanse of ruins. Finally, the dragon subduing general's injuries were too severe, and he could not hold on any longer. There was not a single piece of flesh on his body that was intact, and he was covered with crisscrossing wounds and bloody holes. The 2 black dragons that extended from his shoulders had their necks cut off, and blood flowed freely. Especially on his forehead, there was a long and narrow sword wound that extended all the way to the center of his brows. Just a little more, and his head would have been cut off by the sword of burial of heaven. Also, the dragon subduing general's strength was rapidly weakening, and he only had about 50% of his combat strength left. He knew very well that if he continued to fight, he might be killed on the spot. Damn it! Looks like there's no way to get rid of Ji Tianxing today. I can only think of a long-term plan. The dragon subduing general gritted his teeth and immediately decided to retreat. He waved his blood blade with all his might, forcing Ji Tianxing and the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. Then he formed a seal with his left hand, and his body lit up with dark red bloodlight. With a swoosh, he broke through the sky. With a flash of bloodlight, he escaped into an alternate space and disappeared. Ji Tianxing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing immediately released their divine senses and used their spatial powers to search for his traces and aura. However, the dragon subduing general had already passed through several layers of alternate spaces and moved thousands of miles away. Even if the 3 of them wanted to kill him, they had no way to do so. Helpless, Ji Tianxing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing could only give up. Damn it, he actually escaped. It will be difficult to kill him next time. Ji Tianxing gritted his teeth, his heart filled with anger. The messenger of the divine ruins was also filled with regret. He coughed and said, "No wonder the heaven punishers are invincible and no one can stop them. The dragon subduing general's strength is really terrifying." Fairy Yuqing nodded in agreement. Logically speaking, he is only at the 8th level of the martial god realm and is on par with us. But his battle experience is so rich that it's terrifying, and the number of divine abilities and ultimate skills he has mastered is as numerous as the hairs on an ox. Ji Tianxing suppressed his anger and said calmly, "Seniors, don't worry. Even if the dragon subduing general escapes today, he will only be struggling at death's door and live for a few more months. Now that his wings have been cut off, he is alone and can no longer invade and expand." Seeing that he was full of confidence, the messenger of the divine ruins and Fairy Yuqing also calmed down. The 3 of them were silent, and the atmosphere was awkward and gloomy. Ji Tianxing cupped his hands and bowed to the 2 of them, breaking the silence. "I never thought that the 2 of you would help me at such a critical moment. I, Ji Tianxing, will remember this kindness in my heart and will never forget it." The messenger of the divine ruins waved his hand and said in a solemn tone, "There is no need to be so polite. The dragon's subduing general is from another race and wants to invade the entire Shenwu continent. At this moment of life and death, we should join forces to fight against the enemy." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "Senior's injuries are so tragic. It is better for you to go back and recuperate early to avoid any future troubles." The messenger of the divine ruins nodded to show that he understood and said in a complicated tone, "I know that after you recover from your injuries, you will definitely find the dragon subduing general for revenge and eliminate the root of the problem. Although I want to help you, I can't leave the divine ruins, so I can't help you. After all, I'm only a mausoleum keeper. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, Senior, you worry too much. I have my own ways to deal with the dragon, subduing general. The messenger of the divine ruins did not say anything else and bid farewell to him and Fairy Yuqing before turning to leave. In the sky, only Fairy Yuqing and Ji Tianqing were left. Ji Tianqing looked at Fairy Yuqing and said, Thank you for your help, Fairy Yuqing. Fairy Yuqing waved her hand and said earnestly, You don't have to thank me. The reason why I helped was because I had my own selfish motives. Just like how I helped Luo Shui back then, I had the same thought. I only hope that the two of you won't hold a grudge against Luo Shui. After Yun Yao inherits Goddess Yao Wang's inheritance, don't forget to unlock the world seal and give all the martial gods a chance of survival and hope. Chapter 2478. Fairy Yuqing's words stunned Ji Tianqing. He frowned in confusion and asked, Fairy Yuqing, I can understand your feelings. But are you sure that Yun Yao can break the world seal? Fairy Yuqing hesitated for a moment and said with uncertainty, About the world seal, it happened in the ancient times 30,000 years ago. It had happened so long ago that no one knew the truth or the inside story. The only clue we know is Goddess Yao Wang, so we can only pin our hopes on this. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, I understand. Please don't worry. If Yin Yao really has such ability, we will definitely do our best. But if she can't do anything, then you can only find another way. The hope in Fairy Yuqing's eyes dimmed a lot, and she nodded with a lonely expression. My injuries are too serious, so I have to return to Jade Clear Sky to recuperate. I'll leave you a communication Jade slip. If there's any news, let me know, so that I won't have to wait needlessly. After saying that, Fairy Yuqing left a communication Jade slip and turned to leave. Her back view was bleak and lonely, like a beauty in her twilight years and a hero about to die. Ji Tianqing was experienced, so he could understand that feeling of helplessness and powerlessness. After standing on the spot for a moment, he took out the small golden tower. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, his figure disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, he returned to Jiuqiantan Extreme's tower and appeared on the 5th floor. The previous continuous battles had also caused him to be seriously injured, and his strength was also extremely weak. He hurriedly returned to the 6th floor of the distorted space-time and went into seclusion to recuperate in a dark and secluded place. Time always passed quickly in the distorted space-time. Unknowingly, Ji Tianqing had been recuperating in seclusion for more than half a year. His injuries had finally healed, and his strength had also returned to its peak. However, he did not end his cultivation. He continued to cultivate for another 2 months and naturally broke through to the 2nd level of the martial god realm. Ever since he broke through to the martial god realm, the progress of his strength had slowed down. If he had not fought with so many martial god realm experts and fought with General Fulong, he would not have advanced so quickly. After breaking through to the 2nd level of the martial god realm, his combat strength had increased by several times, and his aura was even more sacred and majestic. After finishing his cultivation, he took out the sword of burial heaven and opened the world in the sword. Without a doubt, Yin Yao's soul had already finished the fusion, and she had already woken up. She was cultivating within peaceful Earth City. She was in an extremely profound, elegant, and otherworldly state. She was like an inconspicuous speck of dust, yet she was as tranquil as a wisp of cloud. It wasn't until Ji Tianqing woke her up that she ended her cultivation and left the sword world. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, At that time, Luo Shui forcefully fused his soul with yours, and you fell into a coma. A few days later, General Fu Long and Ling Xian led the experts of the Heaven Punisher race to attack us. They wanted to capture us all. Fortunately, Old Man God and Fairy Yu Qing helped. We killed Ling Xian and all the experts of the Heaven Punisher race. Only General Fu Long managed to escape. Ji Tianqing told Yin Yao what had happened. Yin Yao nodded slightly, with a complicated expression. She said in a low voice, "Tianqing, I'm sorry, but there's something I have to tell you. The current me is no longer myself." She sighed with a lonely expression. Her lips curled into a self-mocking smile. She murmured, "The words the Divine Master said before he died were exactly the same." She did not disappear. Instead, she continued on in another way. "I am not only Yin Yao, but also Luo Shui and Goddess Yao Wang." At this point, Yin Yao looked at Ji Tianqing with clear eyes. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Tianqing, when I'm no longer myself, will you still treat me the same as before?" Ji Tianqing could see that she was hesitating and struggling in her heart. She was even worried and afraid. After all, she was just Yin Yao in the past. She had her own memories, independent thoughts, and emotions. But now, she had suddenly merged with Luo Shui's emotions and Goddess Yao Wang's memories. Her soul had also become complicated. In her opinion, she was no longer pure. It was as if she had 3 personalities. It was a rare and strange thing. She was very worried that Ji Tianqing would not be able to accept her. Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment. He looked at her with a firm and sincere gaze and smiled. "Yao Yao, you don't have to say sorry. This is not your fault. In fact, the fact that you can have such thoughts proves that you are still you. Whether it's Luo Shui or Goddess Yao Wang, they can't control your emotions and mind. They can't change your nature and thoughts. They're just accessories to you. They give you 2 more memories and experience. This way, you will become more mature and stable. You will grow faster." Hearing his answer, Yun Yao felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She heaved a sigh of relief. The worry and fear in her heart had all dissipated. Her expression also returned to normal. "And, Tianqing, thank you." Yun Yao nodded solemnly. A faint smile appeared on her face. Ji Tianqing reached out and hugged her. He patted her back gently and comforted her. "Don't worry. Whether it's Luo Shui or Goddess Yao Wang's memories, they won't hurt you. What we need to do is to inherit their legacy and fulfill their unfulfilled wishes. For example, the seal of the 5 elements world has suppressed this world for 30,000 years. It has cut off the path of all martial gods. You need to work hard in your cultivation and become strong enough to break the seal for everyone." Yin Yao nodded and explained, "Although I've finished fusing with my spirit, most of the memories related to Goddess Yao Wang are still sealed. My strength is not high enough, so I can't come into contact with those ancient taboos. I also don't know if I can break the seal. In fact, I don't even know if the seal has anything to do with me. However, I'll try my best." Ji Tianqing had already expected this outcome. He comforted her, "It's fine. There's no need to rush this matter. We have plenty of time. You can continue to cultivate here and try to fuse with your spirit's memories as well as Luo Shui's strength as soon as possible. I still have important matters to attend to, so I need to go out." Luo Shui was dead, martial god Tianjue was dead, and Ling Xian had also fallen. The situation on the continent had become even more chaotic. Ji Tianqing needed to find out more about the situation on the Shenwu continent and stabilize the situation as soon as possible. When the time was right, he would go and kill General Fu Long. Then, the world would be at peace. Just as he was about to turn and leave, Yin Yao grabbed his hand and gently said, "Tianqing, wait. There's still something very important." "What is it?" Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and revealed a puzzled expression. Yin Yao lowered her head slightly and whispered, "I have a premonition that Chun Chun and Yaya's pregnancy is about to end. They will be born soon." End of chapter. Chapter 2479. Yin Yao's voice was very soft, but Ji Tianqing could still hear it clearly. When he heard this good news, his body trembled, and a look of pleasant surprise appeared on his face. His eyes, which were as deep as the sea of stars, shone with a bright light. "Really? Our children are about to be born." It had been several years since Yin Yao had given birth to the children. Shun Shun and Yaya were extremely intelligent, and they possessed shocking innate talents. Even though they were still in their mother's womb, the two children already possessed extraordinary strength. In the first few years, Ji Tianxing had often hoped that the children would be born soon. But after a long time, the children still hadn't been born, and his hopes had faded. Now, Yin Yao had suddenly told him this good news, so how could he not be overjoyed? After all, he had lived 2 lives, but this was his first time becoming a father. Yin Yao lowered her head shyly, and her hands gently caressed her swollen belly. She said gently, "My senses are not wrong. The two children have already fallen into a deep sleep, and they won't wake up for a while. They won't wake up until the day they are born, and then we will be able to see them." Ji Tianxing nodded and laughed heartily. "Good. Then I will strive to completely eliminate the Heaven Punisher before the children are born, and I will return peace to Shenwu continent." Yin Yao then gave him a few more words of advice before he left the distorted space-time. 6 days later, Ji Tianxing left the ruins of God, entered the vast divine kingdom, and arrived at Sky Cloud City. As he hurried along, he roughly observed the situation in the vast divine kingdom. More than 95% of the territory had been reclaimed by the vast divine kingdom and returned to the human race. The remaining demons were extremely few in number, and they were all stragglers, so they weren't a threat at all. Peace had also been restored in the Outcloud Empire. Sky Cloud City, which had been razed to the ground, was still the capital of the Outcloud Empire. It was being rebuilt in full swing, and more than half of it had been completed. Ji Tianxing met with Taihao Yun 7 in the recently completed Imperial Palace. Taihao Yunshi was very welcoming of his arrival, and he was very excited. After the two of them met, Taihao Yunshi did not receive him in the main hall. Instead, he brought him to the study. The two of them sat down in the study and began to discuss business. With a smile on his face, Taihao Yunshi looked at Ji Tianxing and asked respectfully, "Senior, you haven't shown up for several months. During this period of time, you must have been doing something earth-shattering, right?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked with a playful smile, "It seems that you have gotten some news?" Taihao Yun 7 nodded repeatedly and excitedly said, "Half a month ago, a piece of news spread throughout the Shenwu continent, and it shook the entire world. The entire martial arts world was in an uproar. It was said that a few peerless martial God realm experts were fighting a great battle in the depths of the ruins of God, causing the heavens and earth to crumble and the sun and moon to dim in comparison. After that battle, many martial gods disappeared without a trace. However, what we can be sure of is that the Heaven Punisher race has suffered many casualties, and the leader of the Devil race has also fallen." As Taihao Yun 7 spoke, he observed Ji Tianxing's reaction. When he saw that Ji Tianxing did not refute him, he became even more certain of his conjecture, and he said with admiration, "When I first heard this news, I was so shocked that I could not believe it. However, after thinking about it carefully, I realized that this matter was most likely related to you. Even the new leader of the Devil race was most likely killed by you, right?" Ji Tianxing did not hide it and nodded. "That's right. I killed the ancestral demon god, and Ling Xian inherited his power and became the new leader. Moreover, Ling Xian joined the dragon's subduing general and followed him to the ruins of God to get rid of me. However, I had the help of 2 senior experts, and they killed a large number of Heaven Punishers as well as Ling Xian. Only the dragon's subduing general managed to escape with serious injuries." When he heard this, Taihao Yunseven's eyes widened, and he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He was so excited that he almost stood up. "Heavens, this is too unbelievable. If the situation is as you say, then our only enemy now is the dragon subduing general." "That's right." Ji Tianxing nodded and calmly said, "As long as we get rid of the dragon's subduing general, the Heaven Punishers will also collapse, and the Shenwu continent will welcome peace." "That's great." Taihao Yun 7 was so excited that he could not help but clench his fists and cheer. Ji Tianxing picked up his teacup and took a sip. He then said slowly, "Godchild, tell me about the boundless divine kingdom and the Shenwu continent. Taihao Yun 7 hurriedly suppressed his excitement and solemnly explained, "Senior, thanks to your help, the boundless Divine Kingdom's territory has basically been recovered. The Devil Race army that invaded the Divine Kingdom has basically been annihilated, and only a small number of them managed to escape back to Dark North Mountain. After martial god Tianju fell, the various empires fell into chaos, as they all wanted to unify and annex other countries. However, the Heaven Punishers took advantage of the situation and took control of several empires. However, this is not a cause for concern. As long as you kill the dragon subduing general, the Heaven Punishers will lose their leader, and they will be like a pile of loose sand that can be quickly defeated. As for Dark North Mountain, its vitality has been greatly damaged after this war, so it is not a cause for concern." After news of the new demon god's death spread, the Devil Race fell into panic and despair, and they all went into hiding, not daring to show their faces. However, the Heaven Punishers were not willing to give up. In the name of appeasing the Devil Race, they wantonly recruited warriors from Dark North Mountain and formed an army. However, many of the Devil Race's tribes have no one to use. When they learned that the Heaven Punishers were capturing warriors everywhere, many of the Devil Race hid in their underground lairs and dangerous places to avoid disaster. At this point, Taihao Yin 7 helplessly sighed and said in a low voice, "The most tense situation right now is the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom's territory, which is still occupied by the Heaven Punishers. All of the humans have become slaves of the Heaven Punishers, and they are currently in an abyss of suffering and suffering. In fact, I heard that the Heaven Punishers have become even more ruthless recently, and they have been exploiting the commoners even more. They are crazily excavating and collecting resources." Ji Tianxing nodded to indicate that he understood. His tone was cold as he said, "This is just their final madness, and it will not last for long. About 80% of the Heaven Punishers' martial gods have already died. They are already panicking. With their current strength, it is impossible for them to take over the entire Shenwu continent. In fact, they cannot even maintain the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom's territory. I reckon that the Heaven Punishers want to obtain some more resources and then retreat after they are defeated." Taihao Yun 7 nodded in agreement. "That's right, I think so too. Senior, what should we do next?" Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and then asked, "Shensi, how are your father's injuries?" Taihao Yun 7 hurriedly replied, "Thank you for your concern, Senior. I asked him a few days ago, and he said that he was fine and would come out of seclusion soon." Ji Tianxing smiled and ordered, then sent a message to Taihao and asked him to help me kill General Fu Long. End of chapter. Chapter 2480. Ever since the fall of the Luo Shui Divine Nation, all of its territories have been controlled by the Heaven Punisher race. Even the Luo Shui Mountain, which symbolized the majesty of the Divine Nation, had been taken over by the dragon subduing general. Before the fall of the Luo Shui Divine Nation, the disciples and elders of the Luo Shui Mountain had fled in all directions. Most of them had died tragically under the Heaven Punisher race's blade in the process of resisting them. Only a small number of people were still alive, but they were scattered all over the continent. They were either enslaved by the Heaven Punisher race or became homeless wanderers. The dragon subduing general had taken over the Luo Shui Mountain and made it his base camp. It was now evening. The setting sun was about to set in the sky, sprinkling down an orange-red afterglow that looked like blood. At the peak of the Luo Shui Mountain, in the most majestic and dignified dragon subduing palace, in a dimly lit secret room filled with dark red fog, General Dragon subduing was quietly sleeping. This specially made secret chamber was located underground and had a radius of 3,000 meters. Only then was it barely able to contain his mountain-like body. His body was wrapped in dark red light as he circulated his energy to heal his injuries. His muscular body was covered with crisscrossing scars, which still looked hideous and terrifying. However, as time passed, the dark red fog continued to flow, and those scars were rapidly disappearing. Suddenly, a respectful voice came from outside the secret chamber. Lord General, Deputy General, and requests an audience. Hearing the black armored guard's voice, the sleeping dragon subduing general slowly opened his dark purple eyes. Let him in. The dragon subduing general moved his wide mouth and let out a low roar that was as deep as thunder. Then, the tall and majestic stone door of the secret chamber slowly opened. And you, who was wearing golden armor and looking travel-worn, stepped into the secret chamber. After he entered the secret chamber, the heavy stone door closed with a bang, and you walked in front of the dragon, subduing general, and bowed respectfully. Subordinate, and you greets the Lord General. After that, he carefully sized up the dragon, subduing general, and instantly frowned. He asked worriedly, Lord General, why are you so heavily injured? The dragon, subduing general, did not stop healing. As he circulated the dark red fog, he said, This is all thanks to that bastard Ji Tianxing. And Yu's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed in disbelief, Ji Tianxing? That's impossible. How can he be your opponent? The dragon subduing general sneered and said slowly, If he was alone, of course, he would not be my opponent, and I would have killed him. However, he still has two helpers. One is an old man who guards the divine ruins, and the other is an old woman who is Luo Shui's master. That is, and Yu was suddenly enlightened, and he heaved a sigh of relief. The dragon subduing general. Subduing general's subduing general looked. Was the subduing general? He subduing general said dragon, subduing general had general. Was subduing general. Subduing general, subduing general. And Yu's body stiffened, and his face turned ugly. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted. General, please calm down. It's all my fault. I didn't investigate properly. Without waiting for him to finish, the dragon subduing general waved his hand and said, This is a tragic lesson. You must remember it well. It's too late to confess now. I don't have many people left. So, what you need to do is to atone for your sins. And Yu quickly nodded and said, This subordinate understands. I will definitely remember General's teachings. The dragon subduing general continued, In this invasion of the five elements world, I am heavily injured. I also lost more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 40 captains. Such losses are unprecedented and will never be repeated. In the past few hundred years, I have led the fleet to conquer more than half of the galaxy and invaded more than 100 worlds. I have never encountered such a mysterious world. And you nodded in agreement. That's right. The five elements world is not only mysterious, but also very special. We have traversed more than half of the Purple Cloud Galaxy and have never seen a world sealed by a deity. Moreover, there are not many martial gods in this world, but they have extremely terrifying supernatural powers and techniques. General, please forgive me for being blunt. I'm afraid we have to prepare to retreat. Hee. The dragon subduing general suddenly laughed coldly. He stared at you coldly and asked, What? You're scared? The final battle is not here yet. Do you think I will lose to that bastard Ji Tianxing? And you was intimidated by the powerful aura. He knelt on the ground in fear and quickly kowtowed to apologize. General, please calm down. I don't mean to belittle you. It's just that you are heavily injured, and Ji Tianxing still has two powerful helpers. If we withdraw our defenses, we can still fight them. But we have occupied the territories of two divine kingdoms. We are too spread out. The dragon subduing general ignored him and said in a domineering and imposing tone, Those two old fellows only have half of their lives left. How would they dare to come and find me? As for Ji Tianxing, he would not dare to come to me alone for revenge. Otherwise, I'll definitely tear him into pieces. And you quickly nodded in agreement and said firmly, That's right. With Ji Tianxing's strength, he's definitely not a match for Lord General. You can easily crush him. With that, the dragon subduing general's anger dissipated. The atmosphere in the secret room calmed down, and the pressure on you also lessened. He hesitated before asking, General, I think, to be on the safe side, why don't you give the order to gather the other 50 captains? Or you can report this to the Grand Marshal. After all, the five elements world is too special. There are even ancient demonic gods reincarnated and divine kings reincarnated thousands of years ago. Originally, the dragon's subduing general frowned and wanted to interrupt Yu, but in the end, he fell silent and nodded. That's right. The legends of ancient demonic gods and human goddesses, as well as Kenshin who died thousands of years ago, have all reappeared. This five elements world must have some kind of secret and power that no one knows. This is very important. If we report this to the Grand Marshal, he will definitely take it seriously. Seeing that the dragon's subduing general had agreed, and Yu smiled and said, "That's right. By then, you will be able to make a great contribution and gain the Grand Marshal's recognition. I have heard you say that our great emperor is connected to the divine kingdom and only follows the will of the divine kingdom." The dragon's subduing general's expression changed, and he scolded sternly, "Shut up. This is a secret that involves the divine kingdom of the upper realm. How dare you speak of it?" And Yu shrunk his neck and said respectfully, "General, please calm down. There are only the two of us here. You don't have to worry about the secret being leaked. I'm also thinking of your future. That's why I brought this up. Think about it. If the divine kingdom knows that there's a mortal world sealed by the gods, and there's a miracle of an ancient demonic god reincarnated." End of chapter. Chapter 2481. And Yu did not finish his sentence. However, General Dragon's subduing had already understood what he meant. The two of them looked at each other. After a moment of silence, they both burst out laughing. "Ha!" General Dragon, subduing, raised his head and laughed. "And you are really daring. How dare you guess the will of the god's court?" And Yu revealed a knowing expression and said with a smile, "The will of the god's court is naturally unpredictable and complicated. It is not something ordinary people like us can guess. However, I believe that if the god's court knows that such a miracle has appeared in the mortal world, they will be very interested. As the person who discovered this secret, you will definitely become the greatest contributor to our race. When the time comes, you will receive God's grace and directly ascend to the upper world. It is not impossible." And Yu's flattery made General Dragon subduing's heart sway as he secretly yearned for it. However, he did not lose his mind and quickly calmed down. He shook his head gently and said, "It is very possible that I will be rewarded for my contributions. As for directly ascending to the upper world with God's grace, that is no different from a fool's dream. Even our marshal and great emperor can only be trapped in the mortal world and serve the god's court. They are all true gods who have broken through to the martial god realm." At this point, General Dragon's subduing's tone was also filled with emotions. And he was very smart. He knew that he could not continue to interrupt, so he remained silent. After a long while, General Dragon, subduing, regained his composure and said in a dignified tone, "This time, I will listen to your advice and report this to the marshal. In addition, I summoned you back because I want you to stay behind and protect me. During this period of time, you'll be in charge of everything. You must be careful of Ji Tianxing's revenge." And Yu hesitated and asked with a frown, "General, what about the affairs of Tianju God Nation? During this period of time, I have been in charge of Tianju God Nation and have been taking in all the empires and forces. The progress has been quite smooth. If I am away for too long, I am afraid that the situation that has been stabilized with much difficulty will fall apart again." General Dragon, subduing, glanced at him and said coldly, "Just now, I was praising you for being sensible and smart enough. I did not expect you to be so muddle-headed on this matter. Our top priority right now is to pull back our defensive forces and prepare for the decisive battle with Ji Tianxing. So what if he temporarily gave up on the Heaven Extinction God Nation? As long as we get rid of Ji Tianxing and kill those two old fellows, the entire Five Elements world will be ours." And Yu's eyes flashed with reluctance. He lowered his head and bowed. This subordinate obeys. The dragon subduing general pretended not to notice the abnormality in his expression. He waved his hand and said, "All right, you can leave now. I'm going to continue recuperating." And Yu bowed and left the secret room. After he left, General Long Fu's face darkened and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "And Yu is too meticulous and calculative. He's very similar to Ling Xian of the demon race. In the past few months, he had been in charge of the Heaven and Divine Nation. Without my suppression and jurisdiction, he had taken over half of the Divine Nation. He's used to having power in his hands and doesn't want to give it up. He's even more unwilling to return to my side and become a guard or pawn. If I get rid of all future troubles and completely control the Shenwu continent, I'm afraid that he won't be willing to be left out and will share the world with me, right? At this point, the dragon-subduing general's lips curled up into a contemptuous sneer. 2 days later, Ji Tianxing returned to the Jiuqianten Ju Tower. He did not waste any time and directly returned to the 6th level of the distorted space-time. The various divine fires that had filled the area had already disappeared. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing guessed that Ji Ku's divine path foundation had most likely stabilized. At the very least, she could accurately control her divine power and divine fire without any wastage or leakage. Reality had proven that his guess was correct. When he went to visit Ji Ku was cultivating and accumulating her strength. She wore a fiery red dress and sat cross-legged in space-time. Her long hair draped behind her head, and her entire body was wrapped in 4 layers of fiery halos. As her breathing rose and fell, there was a vast surge of divine power fluctuating within her body. Of course, the divine power's fluctuations were very stable and powerful, and they were not chaotic or berserk. When she sensed Ji Tianxing's aura, she hurriedly ended her cultivation and opened her eyes. Big brother Tianxing. Jiku stood up and looked at Ji Tianxing with clear eyes. Her beautiful face revealed a look of anticipation. You're finally back. I've already stabilized my divine path foundation, controlled 4 divine fires, and comprehended 8 divine abilities. Big brother Tianxing, I don't want to go into seclusion anymore. This time, I must fight alongside all of you. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. His tone was playful as he said, I just came to visit you and didn't say anything. How did you know that I was going to battle? Did Yao Yao tell you everything that happened before? Jiku was stunned. She shook her head and said, I was cultivating in seclusion before, so big senior sister didn't disturb me. That's right, big brother Tianxing, what happened before? It's a long story. Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment before explaining everything that had happened in detail. After Ji Ku heard everything, she was both shocked and excited. Her eyes shone even brighter. She couldn't help but praise him. She couldn't wait to say, That's great. Big brother Tianxing, since you and big senior sister's injuries have healed, what are we waiting for? Let's take advantage of the fact that the dragon's subduing general's injuries haven't healed and quickly attack his nest. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, That's indeed my plan. This matter shouldn't be delayed. However, don't be impatient. I'll go check on the others. Thus, Ji Ku suppressed her excitement and anticipation and followed him to visit the others. The 2 of them first visited the Black Dragon and Xianyu. The 2 of them were still focused on cultivating. Their strength had already reached the 7th and 8th rank martial sage realm, and they were preparing to break through to the god state. After that, Ji Tianxing brought Ji Ku to visit the White Dragon and Lan Kuan. The White Dragon did not disappoint Ji Tianxing. He had already refined half of martial god Tian Ju's spiritual soul. He was no longer a white dragon shadow. His strength had reached the 9th rank martial sage realm, and he was trying to break through to the god state. Lan Kuan's strength was progressing slower, but he had also reached the 7th rank martial sage realm. The 4 of them had a high chance of breaking through to the god state. Of course, they still needed a long time. Ji Tianxing did not disturb them. After secretly visiting, he brought Ji Ku to find Yun Yao. After such a long period of rest, Yun Yao had already recovered to her peak state. Her strength was stronger than Luo Shui's. In fact, among the 3 of them, she was the strongest. End of chapter. Chapter 24:82. Yin Yao had a premonition that the 2 children were about to be born. However, this was not something that would happen in the near future. It would still take a long time. After the 3 of them met, Ji Tianxing asked about Yun Yao's situation with concern. He was a little hesitant as to whether or not he should bring Yun Yao along. However, Yun Yao knew that he was ready and was about to take action. Thus, she said with a resolute expression, "Tianxing, I have already recovered to my best condition. You don't have to worry. Although General Long Fu is seriously injured, he is an 8th-stage martial god after all. I have to go with you in order to have a chance to kill General Long Fu and completely solve any future problems." Ji Tianxing was a little worried and said in a low voice, "I know all this, but I'm worried that your participation will affect our children." Yin Yao shook her head gently. "Qinshan and Yaya are not that delicate. Moreover, they have already matured and will not be affected too much. You don't have to persuade me anymore. I will definitely fight alongside you." Seeing that her attitude was so resolute, Ji Tianxing did not say anything else and nodded in agreement. After that, the three of them left Juqian 10 Absolute's tower and appeared in the ruins of God. Now that the three of them were unparalleled martial gods, their speed was extremely fast. Each step they took covered hundreds of miles. With the glazed fire dragon's strength and speed, it was no longer useful. Thus, the three of them flew high in the sky and rushed to the eastern part of Shenwu continent as fast as lightning. During the journey, Ji Tianxing took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message. When Ji Ku saw this, he asked, "Brother Tianxing, who did you send a message to? Did you make any arrangements?" Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, "In order to ensure that we can successfully kill General Long Fu, I have to use all the available forces. The messengers of the ruins of God cannot leave the ruins of God. Fairy Yuqing has returned to the endless sky, sea, to cultivate in seclusion. 2 of the 3 divine masters have also fallen. Only martial god Tai Hao is still alive. I've already discussed it with Tai Hao and asked him to lend me a hand." It was only then that Ji Ku understood the reason. He nodded solemnly and said, "The 3 of us, together with martial god Tai Hao, should be able to deal with a heavily injured General Fu Long." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and did not say anything. In fact, he was a little worried and had an uneasy premonition. Noon, Luotian Mountain Peak. More than 30 heaven-punishing race warriors in black armor and wielding sabers and swords escorted a dozen human martial artists in ragged clothes and covered in blood to the center of the square, even though the sky was cloudless and the sun was shining brightly. However, the atmosphere in the plaza was ice-cold, and the aura of death lingered. Everyone stood in the middle of the square and waited silently. The dozen or so human martial artists who were covered in wounds had long been tortured to the point where they no longer looked human. However, they were captured by the Heaven Punisher warriors. They could neither resist nor move. There were men and women, young and old, but they all had one thing in common. They were all former members of Luotian Mountain. The leader was a hunchbacked old woman with white hair. She was Granny Long. In addition, there were a few older martial artists. They were all elders of Luotian Mountain. There were also 6 middle-aged men who were once deacons of Luotian Mountain. There were also 4 young men and women who were once disciples of Luotian Mountain. Among them were Yi Qing Luo, Zhou Bin, and Wen Rinyu. A year ago, they were also handsome and talented martial artists. But now, they were all miserable prisoners who had been tortured to the point where their bodies and souls were damaged. Before long, the silence in the plaza was broken. Thud, thud, thud. A series of heavy footsteps came from afar. The footsteps were so heavy that the ground of the plaza started to tremble. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples slowly raised their blood-stained faces and looked toward the palace at the end of the plaza. They saw a ferocious monster that was as large as a mountain walking toward them. The monster with 4 hooves and 2 black dragons on its shoulders was the dragon subduing general. Following closely behind him was Yu and the 3 silver armor captains. When they came to the center of the plaza, the 30-odd heaven-punishing race warriors bowed in unison. The dragon subduing general nodded slightly and raised his large palms. The warriors then straightened their backs and held Granny Long and the others firmly in the air. The dragon's subduing general looked down at everyone from high above. His lips curled into a sinister smile as he spoke in broken human language. Lowly ants. Do you know why I spared your lowly lives after I took over this territory and didn't kill you? Hearing this, Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples all raised their heads. Everyone stared at the dragon, subduing general with bloodshot eyes. Their hearts burned with hatred. The dragon's subduing general's gaze swept across the crowd. He sneered and said, "Because two very important people are about to return here and reunite with you. And all of you, a bunch of lowly ants, will contribute a little bit of strength to this seat before you die. Use your insignificant lives to give those two people a big gift. You are about to be free. You can see your old friend before you die. Are you happy?" Ha ha. After that, the dragon's subduing general looked up to the sky and laughed. Granny Long raised her head with difficulty and stared at him with bloodshot eyes. She shouted in a hoarse voice, "Dragon subduing, you cowardly bastard! Kill us if you have the guts." The second elder also raised his head unyieldingly. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as he cursed, "Despicable and shameless bastard! Don't you dare use us to threaten the divine master. Even if we die, we will never yield to you." The other elders, deacons, and disciples also began to curse and roar. The dragon subduing general was not angry. He opened his left palm with a sinister smile. Dozens of fist-sized dark red crystals flew out of his huge left palm and floated in the air. The dragon subduing general looked at you behind him and ordered, "Do it." And you nodded and walked in front of Granny Long. He sneered and said in a mocking tone, "Old hag, you were the one who screamed the loudest just now. Let's start with you." After that, he slowly stretched out his right hand. 6 sharp fingers opened up and pierced into Granny Long's chest like a knife, grabbing her heart. Pooh! With a muffled sound, Granny Long's heart was dug out by Yu's right hand. Dark red blood spurted out from the fist-sized bloody hole. The incomparable pain caused Granny Long's body to tremble violently, and she let out a miserable scream. But she was a martial sage and did not die on the spot. And Yu waved his hand and took a dark red crystal from the air and stuffed it into the hole in Granny Long's chest. Then he formed a few hand seals and shot out a few dark red rays of light that enveloped Granny Long's body. Under the horrified and angry gazes of the crowd, Granny Long gradually fell into a coma, and the hole in her chest quickly healed. End of chapter. Chapter 2483. In the blink of an eye, Granny Long's injuries were healed. Other than being unconscious, there was nothing wrong with her. Not long after, she woke up. Her eyes were cloudy, and her body was bent as she stood. Even when the 2 black armored guards let her go, she did not struggle or run away. She stood there like a puppet. On the surface, she looked the same as before. But the elders, deacons, and disciples could clearly feel that she had changed. She had become muddle-headed and had no thoughts of her own. She was like a puppet being controlled by someone. This scene made the elders, deacons, and disciples feel deeply worried and fearful. The second elder, who was closest to Granny Long, shouted angrily, "Bastard, what did you do to Granny Long?" What he asked was what everyone wanted to know. But General Long and you would not answer. And you sneered and said in a mocking tone, "You want to know the answer? Why don't you try it yourself?" As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his right hand. His sharp fingers pierced into the second elder's chest. He was slow because he wanted to let the second elder feel the pain of having his heart cut out. Blarg, and you dug out a warm, bright red heart that was covered in blood. He squeezed hard with his right hand, and the heart exploded into a cloud of blood. The second elder screamed and fainted from the pain. And you took out a dark red crystal and stuffed it into the second elder's chest. Then he cast a few more blood rays into the second elder's body. Not long after, the unconscious second elder woke up and became as stiff as Granny Long. Next, the elders were tortured one by one. Their hearts were cut out. Then it was the deacons and a few young disciples. After a few minutes, everyone's hearts were cut out and a dark red crystal was planted in their bodies. And he nodded slightly and smiled. He seemed to be very satisfied with his masterpiece. General Long said in a dignified tone, "And you, I'll leave everything here to you. You must make arrangements for them. I've used 16 slaughter crystals. I must see the results." And Yu quickly turned around and bowed. He said confidently, "General, don't worry. I will do my best." The dragon-subduing general didn't say anything more. He turned around and returned to the palace. After he left, and Yu ordered the black-armored guards, "Men, tie these lowly commoners to the stake." More than 30 black-armored guards hurriedly escorted everyone to the high platform in the middle of the square. The 300-meter tall stone platform had been built not long ago, and a powerful divine formation had been set up. On the high platform, 16 thick and sturdy bronze pillars stood erect. Their surface was covered with sharp thorns, blades, and saw teeth. That evening, the surrounding tens of thousands of miles around the Luotian mountain was covered by dark clouds. Not a single ray of sunlight could be seen. The world was dark and eerily silent. Even the air seemed to have stopped flowing. A formless feeling of oppression lingered in everyone's hearts. Those who were weaker and didn't have enough mental fortitude were actually pressured to the point that they couldn't breathe. At this moment, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the sky above the Luotian mountain. Crack! Following a crisp, shattering sound, a wide crack was torn open in the sky by the golden light. 3 figures passed through the golden light and flew out of the crack. They stood in the sky above the mountain and looked down at the mountain peak with cold expressions. They were 3 handsome and peerlessly beautiful young men and women. The young man standing in the middle was wearing a white robe with silver-rimmed cloud patterns. He had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes and an extraordinary aura. There was a stunning beauty on each side of him. One was wearing a fiery red dress and looked delicate and charming. The other was wearing a moon-white dress and looked cold and noble. Without a doubt, these 3 people were Ji Tianxing, Ji Ku, and Yun Yao. Before the operation started, Ji Tianxing had learned a lot of information from Tai Hao Yunqi. He knew that the dragon-subduing general had occupied the Luotian mountain and treated it as his base. Therefore, there was an 80% chance that the dragon-subduing general was hiding on the Luotian mountain to recuperate. Ji Tianxing released his divine perception and enveloped the entire mountain peak. He began to investigate the situation on the mountain peak and search for traces of the dragon-subduing general. At that moment, Yun Yao's expression suddenly changed. She pointed at the square on the mountain peak and said with a frown, "Look." Ji Tianxing and Ji Ku looked in the direction of the voice, and their gazes landed on the high platform in the middle of the square. They saw 16 ferocious-looking copper pillars standing on the stone platform that was 1,000 feet tall. There were 16 human martial artists in ragged clothes and covered in blood tied to the copper pillars. They were unable to resist or move. At that moment, 16 black-armored Heaven Punisher warriors were waving long whips that flickered with lightning as they whipped the human martial artists continuously. As crisp cracking sounds rang out, lightning flashed on the high platform and blood splattered everywhere. The 16 human martial artists were tortured until they were covered in cuts and bruises. They were on the verge of death and constantly let out hoarse and desperate cries. Even though the high platform was covered in a layer of blood-red light, it could not block the dull sounds of the long whips whipping their bodies. Upon seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku's faces darkened, and a cold light surged from their eyes. Yun Yao recognized the white-haired old woman tied to one of the copper pillars. Her pupils constricted, and she was so angry that her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "Tianxing, look, that's Grandma Long. There are also a few elders, deacons. Yiqing Luo, Zhou Bin, and Wen Rinyu. Those 16 people are all from the Luotian mountain." Yun Yao's voice trembled. She was angry and heartbroken. Seeing her former companion and friend, Grandma Long, being tortured so miserably, she felt a stabbing pain in her heart, and her body also trembled. Ji Tianxing also felt the same way. His chest burned with rage, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He had not interacted much with those elders, deacons, and disciples. However, in his memory, the disciples of the Luotian mountain were very kind and respectful to him, especially Grandma Long. She treated him like a nephew and trusted him. She had helped him a lot. Damn those heaven punishers. They invaded the Luotian mountain, captured the disciples of the Luotian mountain, and tortured them like this. Today, I will bathe the Luotian mountain in blood and kill all the heaven punishers. Ji Tianxing gritted his teeth and shouted angrily. His figure flashed as he charged toward the high platform in the middle of the square. Swoosh! In the next instant, he charged onto the high platform and punched out with both fists. Two gigantic phantoms of dragons and elephants, which were as large as mountains, hit the blood-red light barrier with a loud bang. Kaboom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, countless blood-red light fragments burst out and covered the sky. The blood-red light barrier formed by the divine-level defensive array could not withstand the power of the dragon-elephant divine fist and was shattered on the spot. End of chapter. Chapter 2484. Violent shockwaves spread out from the peak of Luotian Mountain. The entire mountain shook, and the square, in a radius of 100 miles, shook violently. Numerous cracks formed in the ground. The houses and buildings around the square were smashed into smithereens, leaving behind a mess of ruins. The sudden turn of events caused all the black armored guards on the high platform to be stunned in place. Everyone turned their heads to look at Ji Tianxing, their faces filled with shock. Bam! Ji Tianxing descended from the sky and landed on the high platform. He looked around and swept his cold gaze across the black armor bodyguards. His body was filled with killing intent. All of you beasts, go to hell! Ji Tianxing shouted angrily. He raised his hands and shot out dozens of starry sword radiance at lightning speed. Swoosh! 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 More than 60 starry sword radiance shot out from the high platform like a rain of arrows and shot toward the 16 black armored bodyguards. The black armored bodyguards were martial sages, and they had expected the attack and were prepared for it. When the starry sword radiance appeared, they did not hesitate to teleport away and run away. However, their speed was still too slow. Dozens of starry sword lights immediately caught up with them and pierced their bodies with a loud bang. Bam! 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 There was a series of explosions, and the bodies of the black armored bodyguards were smashed into smithereens and scattered in the sky. Only 3 of the black armored bodyguards were spared, and they managed to avoid being smashed into smithereens. The black armored bodyguards' limbs were chopped off, and they screamed in pain as they fell onto the square. Before Ji Tianxing could chase after the black armored bodyguards, Yun Yao descended from the sky. She waved her shadowless dual swords and shot out dozens of cold radiances. Swoosh! 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 15 crescent-shaped sword radiance hit the 3 black armored bodyguards. Instantly, the 3 black armored bodyguards followed in the footsteps of their companions. Their bodies were smashed into smithereens, and they fell onto the ruins. The black armored guards who executed Granny Long and the others had all turned into ashes. Only then did Yun Yao's anger dissipate a lot. Ji Tianxing turned around and walked toward Granny Dragon. His hands glowed with golden sword lights as he slashed at the chains on the bronze pillars. 2 thick bronze chains bound Granny Long tightly. Ding! Ding! With 2 crisp sounds, the 2 bronze chains were cut in half by the sword light and fell to the ground. Ji Tianxing walked in front of Granny Long and said with a complicated expression, "Granny Long, I'm sorry we're late." Granny Long's body was bent over, and her blood-stained silver hair covered her face. She wanted to take a step towards Ji Tianxing, but her footsteps faltered, and she fell to the ground. Ji Tianxing subconsciously reached out his hands to help her up. At this moment, Ji Ku's shout came from 1,000 feet behind him. "Wait!" Ji Tianxing stopped and turned to look at Ji Ku with a questioning expression. Ji Ku quickly shook his head and explained with a serious expression, "Big Brother Tianxing, Granny Long, and these people are a little strange. There's something wrong with them." Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were stunned. They stared at the elders and disciples and carefully observed them. When they saw Granny Long and the others being tortured, they were extremely angry and neglected the details. After all, Granny Long and the others' faces were covered in blood, and their hair was disheveled. They looked like they were on the brink of death. Now that Ji Ku reminded them, the two of them realized that something was wrong. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples' eyes were lifeless and cloudy. It looked as if he had lost his mind, his thoughts, and his consciousness. "Oh no, I'm afraid we've been tricked." Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. He had a bad feeling about this. However, before he could leave the high platform, something unexpected happened. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples' bodies lit up with blood-red light and suddenly exploded. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion suddenly burst out, piercing through the 9 heavens and resounding for thousands of miles. 16 people exploded at the same time, and their bodies were blasted into powder. However, an endless dark red light burst out from their bodies, instantly drowning the high platform and covering the sky for hundreds of miles. The overwhelming dark red light gathered into a huge blood-red ball of light that rose into the sky like a flame. The entire Luotian mountain was enveloped by the blood-red light. Within 1,000 miles, there was only the blood-red light between heaven and earth, like a sea of fire. There was no doubt that the entire high platform was blasted into powder. Even the entire square and all the houses and buildings on the mountain peak were razed to the ground and turned into dust. Ji Tianxing was also hit by the terrifying explosion and was sent flying. Swoosh! He was covered in blood as he tumbled in the air, drawing an arc in the sky as he flew to the edge of the cliff 100 miles away. Although he sensed the danger, he circulated his energy to the maximum and used a defensive superpower to form a dark golden shield on the surface of his body. However, the destructive power of the explosion still shattered the dark golden shield. He was covered in wounds, and more than 30 wounds and cracks appeared on his body. Golden divine blood spurted out and soaked his white robe. Boom! Ji Tianxing crashed into the ruins at the edge of the cliff with a dull thud, creating a deep pit in the ground and sending dirt and rocks into the sky. Although Yun Yao was not on the high platform, she was very close to it. She was also sent flying by the blood-red light. Fortunately, she was wearing the dark golden divine armor, which reduced the power of the explosion by 60 to 70%. Moreover, her strength had reached the LV-6 martial god realm. Therefore, she was only slightly injured and did not suffer any serious injuries. After she fell into the ruins, she immediately got up and rushed to Ji Tianxing worriedly to check on Ji Tianxing's injuries. As for Ji Ku, she was the furthest away from the high platform and had already sensed that something was wrong. When the blood-red light exploded, she had already used her superpower to form a golden and red fireball to protect herself. However, she was still sent flying dozens of miles away and crashed into the ruins. The divine fireball had collapsed, and she had also suffered internal injuries. Her face was pale, and a trickle of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. In the blink of an eye, the sacred and majestic Luotian mountain had become a charred ruin. A few ravines appeared on the mountain, and countless rocks collapsed. The mountain peak was on the verge of collapse. The dust and blood-red light that blotted out the sky gradually thinned and dissipated. Ji Ku and Yun Yao ignored their injuries and flew to Ji Tianxing's side. Cough, cough! Ji Tianxing crawled out of the ruins and coughed violently before he staggered to his feet. His long hair was draped behind his head, and his body was covered in blood and dirt. However, a dazzling golden light burst out from his body and immediately shook off the dust on his body. Damn the dragon, subduing general. He is indeed despicable. He lifted his sleeve to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the sky sharply and shouted with a murderous aura. Although he looked miserable with more than 30 wounds on his body, these injuries were not serious. But in reality, this injury was nothing, and it did not affect him from continuing to fight. After all, he had an extremely powerful and unique divine body. Chapter 2485. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was fine, Yun Yao and Ji Ke were relieved. At this moment, in the northern skies of the Lu Ocean Mountain, an arrogant and tyrannical laughter rang out. Huh. The sound came from the sky like thunder. Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ke looked up and saw a monster as big as a mountain flying toward them from afar. This monster was half human and half beast. Its entire body was covered in black armor, and two ferocious black dragons extended from its shoulders. He was the dragon subduing general. Behind him were several hundred black-armored warriors of the Heaven Punishing clan. They formed a mighty group. Naturally, there were also 7 martial god-level powerhouses in silver armor among them, and you was among them. These were the elites of the Heaven Punishers. The remaining 1,000 or so black-armored warriors were guarding the territories of the Luo River and Tianju Divine Kingdoms. The dragon-subduing general came to the sky above Luotian Mountain and looked down at Ji Tianxing and the other two. Seeing that the 3 of them were in a sorry state and were injured, he smirked. Ji Tianxing, are you satisfied with the surprise I prepared for you? Ji Tianxing sneered. Hee, despicable and shameless alien race. You only know how to use such despicable tricks. It's a pity that your trap is too weak. It can only tickle me. Is that so? The dragon-subduing general was not angry. Instead, he continued to smirk. Those 16 human worms were your friends and comrades. You must be very angry to see them turn into ashes with your own eyes, right? Ji Tianxing nodded. That's right. I am very angry. That's why I will kill all the Heaven Punishers and leave no one alive. That's the only way I can comfort their souls in heaven. Haha. General Dragon Fu roared with laughter, his face full of disdain. What nonsense! What shameless boasting! Ji Tianxing slowly raised his right hand. A black light flashed in his palm, and he took out the burial of heaven. Cut the crap. General Dragon subduing, your death is here. Hand over your life. Ji Tianxing coldly snorted. His left hand formed a sword seal while his right hand waved the burial of heaven, valiantly slashing out a sword strike. Heaven's splitting sword. The sword of burial of heaven unleashed a giant sword that was 10,000 feet long and shone with golden light. It tore through the sky and slashed towards General Dragon subduing. The dragon subduing general's expression didn't change. He raised his huge palms and slapped out a dark red light, facing the giant sword. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the gigantic sword shattered into millions of golden shards and scattered in the sky. That earth-shattering dark red light was also cut into pieces. At the same time, Yu pulled out his pitch-black saber and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Warriors of the Heaven Punishers, listen up, kill them at all costs." The few silver-armored captains and hundreds of Heaven Punisher warriors all raised their weapons and roared like thunder. Kill! Kill them all! Leave no one alive! Tear Ji Tianxing into pieces. Then, Yu and the few silver-armored captains flew out and charged towards Ji Ke and Yun Yao without any regard for their own safety. Hundreds of black-armored warriors surged forward like a black tide and surrounded the two of them. Meanwhile, Ji Tianxing and General Dragon, subduing, both flew thousands of miles away and started their battle. Ji Tianxing, without the help of the old man of the divine ruins and Fairy Yu Qing, how are you going to fight me? As he spoke, General Dragon, subduing, waved his palms and unleashed a barrage of sharp, blood-red blades that shot towards Ji Tianxing like a rain of arrows. At the same time, the 2 black dragons on his shoulders also spat out a series of dark red fireballs that shot towards Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing waved the burial of heaven and unleashed a barrage of sword light to block General Dragon, subduing's attack. At the same time, he unleashed the shadow of a dragon and elephant to counterattack. Dragon subduing, you were severely injured previously and lost a lot of your strength. How much have you recovered? Even without the help of the 2 seniors, killing you is as easy as slaughtering a dog. The endless blood-red blades and dark red fireballs collided with the dazzling golden sword light and the shadow of a dragon and elephant, resulting in an earth-shattering boom. All sorts of blades, fireballs, and shadows collapsed, turning into millions of light fragments that rained down from the sky like a torrential downpour. In just a short period of time, Ji Tianxing and General Dragon Subduing had exchanged more than 300 blows. Neither of them had the upper hand, nor were they injured. They were actually evenly matched. Such an outcome made Ji Tianxing feel more at ease. He was even more certain that General Dragon Subduing had not recovered his strength. General Dragon Subduing's expression did not change, but he was actually filled with shock and disbelief. Damn it! How long has it been since the last battle? Not only has he recovered from his injuries in such a short period of time, but his strength has also increased by several folds? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, General Dragon Subduing said in a low voice, Ji Tianxing, it's really rare for a genius like you to appear in this ignorant and closed-off world. It's a pity that you shouldn't have gone against me, much less my race. Do you know that my race has always been invincible in the purple cloud star zone, sweeping through hundreds of worlds? This 5 elements world will definitely bow down to my race. If you persist in going about things the wrong way, only death awaits you. I'll advise you one last time. Stop immediately, and you can still keep your life. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a disdainful sneer. Huh, did I hear wrongly? General Dragon Subduing, who was so arrogant just now, is actually cowardly and admitting defeat? If you kneel down and surrender now and kowtow to me 100 times, perhaps I will spare your worthless life. But you are so stupid that it's laughable. You actually used the Heaven Punisher race to threaten me? Do you know that I once controlled thousands of deities and ruled over 3,000 worlds? Everywhere I went, the deities and living beings bowed to me. The so-called Heaven Punisher race doesn't even have the right to kneel to me. Such arrogant words were a great humiliation and provocation to General Dragon Subduing. He was so angry that his entire body trembled. His eyes turned blood red and blazed with flames. Ji Tianxing, you are too arrogant. General Dragon Subduing roared in rage. So what if you were once a supreme being? Now you are just an empty god. In front of a real deity, you are as weak as an ant. Moreover, thousands of years have passed. The world today is no longer the era you were in back then. The Heaven Punisher race has received the deity's decree and unified the entire purple cloud star zone. This is a trend that no one can reverse. If you swear to be a mantis that blocks a car, you will only be crushed. As he roared, General Dragon Subduing struck out with a bloody light that turned into a giant palm and slammed down. Ji Tianxing hurriedly used his ultimate sword skill to block the attack. Hundreds of dazzling golden sword radiances pierced through the giant palm. His robes fluttered as he laughed domineeringly. Receive the deity's decree? I am a deity, the king of deities. Dragon Subduing, why don't you ask your Heaven Punisher race to kneel and listen to my decree? End of chapter. Chapter 2486. Ji Tianxing's words angered General Dragon Subduing so much that he almost vomited blood. Originally, he wanted to use the Heaven Punisher race and the Celestial Court behind them to threaten Ji Tianxing. This way, he could get rid of Ji Tianxing without shedding a drop of blood and easily occupy the 5 elements world. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianxing did not care about the Heaven Punisher race at all. Even the deities of the upper realm could not pose any threat to Ji Tianxing. General Dragon Subduing was at his wit's end. Since he could not persuade Ji Tianxing to surrender, he could only fight until the end and kill him. He was filled with rage as he used his divine powers and ultimate skills, attacking ferociously without regard for anything else. Ji Tianxing counterattacked calmly. He used all kinds of divine powers and ultimate skills as he fought with General Dragon Subduing in the sky. The two of them fought fiercely. All kinds of divine powers flashed continuously, illuminating a radius of a few thousand miles. The sky was also shattered, revealing hundreds of thousands of pitch-black cracks. The violent and devastating shockwaves were like rings of multicolored ripples that kept spreading outwards, looking exceptionally gorgeous. 3,000 miles away, at the peak of the Luotian Mountain, and Yu and 6 silver-armored captains led hundreds of elite warriors to besiege Yun Yao and Ji Ku. More than 600 black-armored warriors formed a huge encirclement, sealing off an area of 100 miles. They formed a 6-pointed star battle formation, and their powers merged. They released a dark red light that covered the sky, suppressing Yun Yao and Ji Ku. With every breath, hundreds and thousands of blood-red blades would shoot out like a rain of arrows, drowning the two of them. Yun Yao wore her dark gold divine armor. Her defense was unparalleled. She could ignore the black-armored warriors' attacks. She waved her shadowless dual swords with a cold expression, and sword shadows filled the sky as she fought with the silver-armored captains. Starfall, Milky Way ribbon. Boom, 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 boom. Beams of starry sword light collided with the blood-red light in the sky, creating a deafening sound that reverberated in the sky. Several silver-armored captains were forced back by her attacks, and only then did they manage to block her attacks with all their might. Not long after, the armors of the captains were penetrated. All of them were heavily injured, and their bodies were stained with blood. On the other side, Ji Ku was fighting within Yu and the 2 silver-armored captains. Her entire body was engulfed in golden divine flames, and a pair of phoenix wings materialized behind her back, making her appear especially holy and noble. On her left wrist, she wore a string of sparkling starlight beads, releasing a starlight shield to firmly protect herself. No matter how many bloody blades slashed at her, they were unable to break through her starlight shield and hurt her at all. She stared at Yu and the others with a serious face. She performed a series of hand seals and released the divine flames of different colors. Heaven-burning leaf fire, flames of nirvana. The Nanming primordial fire covered the sky and engulfed Yu and the 2 captains, burning them black all over. Immediately after, the golden flames of nirvana surged out and turned into 3 pillars of fire that blasted Yu and the others. Boom, 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 boom. Yu and the 2 silver-armored captains were sent flying, and blood gushed out of their mouths and noses. Although Yun Yao and Ji Ku were surrounded by hundreds of people, and the difference in numbers between the 2 sides was huge. However, the 2 of them were very powerful, and they were not at a disadvantage at all. The battle lasted for about half an hour, and there was still no clear victor. Ji Ku and Yun Yao were not injured, but Yu and the other captains were all covered in dust, and they were in a miserable state. Dozens of the hundreds of black-armored warriors were also killed by the shockwaves of the battle. The terrifying shockwaves spread in all directions and soon destroyed the Luotian Mountain. The 10,000-meter-tall mountain finally collapsed under the weight of the shockwaves. The mountain collapsed into a huge pile of rubble, and endless smoke and dust flew everywhere. The ground within 1,000 miles shook from the shockwaves, and there were cracks everywhere. Just as the 2 sides were in the midst of a fierce battle, a dazzling golden divine light suddenly lit up in the sky not far away. Swoosh! That divine light streaked across the sky like lightning, and it instantly traversed 300 miles and arrived at the peak of the Luotian Mountain. At that moment, the divine light split into 4 and turned into 4 dazzling guillotines that were thousands of feet long, and they slashed into the crowd. Boom, 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 boom. Following the 4 earth-shattering explosions, a dazzling golden light burst out from the crowd, and countless pieces of corpses and blood splattered everywhere. At least hundreds of black-armored warriors were killed on the spot by the guillotines. The sudden change made the expressions of the black-armored warriors and Yu and the others stiffen. Fear flashed in their eyes. Everyone knew that the powerful human cultivators had come to their aid, and Yu and the other captains quickly retreated and put up a defensive and alert posture. The remaining hundreds of black-armored warriors also quickly shrank their formation, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Seeing this, Yun Yao and Ji Ku exchanged looks. They both understood what was going on. They could both guess that the human martial god who had come to their aid was martial god Tai Hao. As expected, a giant crack appeared in the sky 100 miles to the south, and a sacred golden light lit up. Swoosh! A burly figure passed through the crack and appeared in the sky. It was a middle-aged man wearing golden armor and a purple cloak. It was martial god Tai Hao. He held a golden broadsword that was as wide as a bench in his hand. He looked coldly at the heaven-punishing warriors and shouted coldly as he charged over. Swoosh! He waved his golden broadsword, and golden light shadows filled the sky as they fell on the heaven-punishing warriors. Bam! 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 Instantly, more than 30 black-armored warriors could not dodge in time and were sliced into pieces by the golden sword shadows. Blood mixed with the pieces of corpses fell from the sky, giving off a thick smell of blood. The hundreds of black-armored warriors' expressions turned extremely ugly. Their eyes were filled with fear and helplessness as they all retreated. Martial god Tai Hao took the opportunity to charge into the crowd. Like a ferocious tiger in a flock of sheep, he started a massacre. Yin Yao and Ji Ku also took the opportunity to attack Yu and the captains with all their might. A cold light covers heaven and earth, and two sleeves shake the starry sky. Yin Yao moved mysteriously as she waved the shadowless sword with both hands. Her sleeves fluttered, and sword light filled the sky like a fairy scattering flowers. Ji Ku raised her left hand and slapped toward Yu. 9 rings of starlight appeared, suppressing Yu and the two captains. She made a strange hand seal with her right hand. Her index and middle fingers pierced toward the two captains, and 2 beams of white flame shot out. Swoosh! Swoosh! The 2 beams of white flames were like spears. They instantly pierced through the sky, piercing through the 2 captains' silver armor and into their chests. Bam! Bam! Instantly, the scales on the 2 captains' chests shattered, and their bodies exploded. Thousands of pieces of flesh mixed with purple blood fell from the sky, but they were burned to ashes by the divine fire before they fell to the ground. Thus, Yin Yao, Ji Ku, and martial god Tai Hao firmly held the upper hand. And Yu, the captains, and the black-armored warriors were all terrified, and their morale was low. They retreated into the distance as they resisted the Three's attacks. Chapter 2487. As time passed, everyone's battlefield also changed. And Yu and hundreds of black-armored soldiers retreated to the north for about 5,000 miles. During this process, more than half of the 600 black-armored soldiers were killed by martial god Tai Hao. Only about 100 were left. 2 of the 6 captains were killed by Ji Ku and 2 by Yin Yao. The 2 captains who survived were also severely injured. They followed Yu, who was also severely injured, and ran away in panic. The outcome was decided. Yin Yao and Ji Ku were both worried about Ji Tianxing's safety. They wanted to leave the battlefield and help Ji Tianxing. However, only one of them could leave. Otherwise, it would be difficult for martial god Tai Hao to kill Yu, 2 captains, and more than 100 black-armored soldiers. At this critical moment, Yin Yao looked at Ji Ku with determined eyes and said, "Cuckoo, you and Tai Hao go after these soldiers. I'll help Tianxing take care of General Dragon Fu." Seeing her determined attitude, Ji Ku could only nod after hesitating for a while. After all, now is not the time to argue about who should help. Yin Yao was stronger. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, Yin Yao turned around and left. She rushed thousands of miles away at lightning speed to help Ji Tianxing. Ji Ku didn't waste any time. He used all his strength to cast more than 30 nirvana flames. Bam! 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 With a series of muffled sounds, the dazzling golden nirvana flames hit more than 30 black-armored soldiers. Instantly, those black-armored soldiers were smashed into pieces. The pieces of flesh that splattered in the sky were also burned to ashes by the nirvana flames. Martial god Tai Hao caught up with Yu. He waved his sword and cast 49 sword lights, blocking Yu's path. And you could only cast a spell to block it. He formed a bloodlight shield while throwing out palm shadows. Bang! Bang! The palm shadows and sword lights clashed, creating a thunderous sound that shook the sky. All the palm shadows were shattered, but the sword lights didn't weaken. They hit the bloodlight shield. Crack! The bloodlight shield collapsed, turning into fragments that scattered all over the sky. And Yu's golden armor was dented and chipped by the sword light. Blood spurted out of the gaps. Before he could turn around and escape, Jiku charged at him again. Sacred Flame, Divine Finger. Jiku clenched his sword fingers and channeled the holy flame in his body to form two blinding golden sword auras that pierced towards Yu's chest and head. The two fiery golden swords instantly arrived in front of Yu with unparalleled power. At the critical moment, Yu held the black saber with both hands and blocked in front of his chest. Boom! A holy flame golden sword struck the saber and shattered, exploding into a sky full of golden flames. The other holy flame golden sword pierced Yu's head without any hindrance. Boom! With a muffled explosion, Yu's head exploded on the spot, splashing out countless pieces of brain matter. Then, a strange scene appeared. Yu's head exploded, but he didn't die on the spot. He screamed in pain and roared in anger. He waved his saber wildly and charged at Jiku without any fear of death. Swish, swish, swish. He waved his saber and unleashed dozens of bloody lights that enveloped Jiku's body. He wanted to take her down with him. Jiku didn't panic. She cast a spell with her left hand and channeled the power of the heavenly star chain to form an extremely sturdy shield. Boom, 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 boom. Dozens of blood-red lights pierced the shield and exploded with a deafening sound. The blood-red light fragments filled the sky. But the shield was indestructible, and Jiku wasn't hurt. She took the opportunity to raise her right hand and unleashed a fiery palm the size of a mountain, slamming it towards Yu. Phoenix Cry of the Nine Heavens. Within the crimson flame palm, there was actually a phantom of a phoenix fluttering in the air. Its posture was incomparably majestic, and it let out a clear cry towards the sky. Boom! The giant flaming palm slammed into Yu, creating an earth-shattering explosion that shook the nine heavens. Yu's headless body could no longer withstand the divine power and exploded into a pile of flesh and blood. Swish! Crimson divine flames swept across the sky, burning the flesh and blood that were falling from the sky into ashes. The dozen or so black-armored warriors who were relatively close to him were also burned to death by the crimson divine flames and turned into ashes. The two surviving captains and the hundreds of black-armored soldiers were scared out of their wits when they saw Yu being killed. Their fighting spirit completely disappeared. They were truly terrified. They didn't dare to fight back anymore. They all scattered and ran away. So, Jiku and Taihao split up to chase after them. After about 100 breaths of time, the two of them had successfully killed the two captains. Then, they chased after the fleeing black-armored warriors. In the sky 10,000 feet above the ground, Ji Tianxing and General Dragon, subduing, continued to teleport, clashing again and again. Boom, boom, boom. Every time they clashed, there would be an earth-shattering explosion and a dazzling divine light that spread out like a halo. The sky was collapsing, and cracks and holes appeared one after another. In the pitch-black void, a violent black storm descended and raged in the sky. Even though Ji Tianxing and General Dragon were powerful, they didn't dare to touch those void storms. 45 minutes passed. The two of them had exchanged tens of thousands of blows, but there was still no winner. Ji Tianxing's black robe had long turned into ashes and dissipated. Now he was in the celestial dragon tyrant body state and turned into a golden giant 100 meters tall. His upper body was naked and covered in golden dragon scales. His long hair fluttered in the wind. His strong and perfect body was covered with crisscrossing wounds, and golden blood kept seeping out. Even the left side of his face had a wound that was more than 10 feet long, extending all the way to his neck. Even though he was badly injured, he didn't show any signs of exhaustion or weakness. Instead, his aura was even more domineering and valiant. He was like a primordial beast, his entire body filled with violent, killing intent, erupting with terrifying power. Even though General Dragon was as huge as a mountain and was dozens of times bigger than him, his aura wasn't any weaker. Swoosh! His figure flashed and crossed hundreds of miles in an instant, charging in front of General Dragon. He held the 100-meter-long sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed down from the sky toward General Dragon's head. In a split second, General Dragon's eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, he raised his palms and clamped down on the sword of Burial of Heaven. When the sword of Burial of Heaven was only 10 feet away from his head, it was clamped down by his huge palms and couldn't move anymore. Ji Tianxing clenched his teeth and desperately activated his divine power. He held the sword of Burial of Heaven and pressed it down. However, General Dragon also released his strongest power and tried his best to hold on. He didn't allow the sword of Burial of Heaven to move at all. The two of them were in a stalemate high in the sky. Violent energy surged around them and lit up with resplendent light. The two of them were competing on the strength and foundation of their divine power. Whoever couldn't hold on first would lose. At this critical moment, a pure white figure quietly appeared behind General Dragon, subduing. Chapter 24:88. The white figure that suddenly appeared was graceful, cold, and noble. It was Yin Yao. Her face was as cold as ice. She held a divine sword in each hand, and a sharp, murderous intent flashed across her eyes. Without hesitation, she waved her two swords and unleashed her most violent divine power, stabbing toward the back of the dragon, subduing General. Swoosh! The two swords stabbed forward, but there was no dazzling sword light or colorful scene. There were only two invisible sword lights that were hundreds of feet long. They pierced toward the dragon, subduing General's shoulders in an indestructible manner. The next moment, the dragon subduing General realized that something was wrong. A chill ran down his spine. He was filled with anxiety and anger, but he couldn't turn around to block. Otherwise, he would be injured by Ji Tianxing. At this critical moment, the two black dragons on his shoulders suddenly turned their heads and opened their bloody mouths, about to spit out endless blood. However, the two black dragons were still one step too slow. Bam! Bam! The two silent sword lights stabbed the two black dragons, creating a deafening sound. Instantly, the heads of the two black dragons exploded. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. The extremely violent impact made the dragons subduing General tremble all over. The pain of the two black dragons' heads being smashed made him twitch all over. His expression also became ferocious and frightening. Under the pain, his power was slightly delayed, and he couldn't resist Ji Tianxing's suppression. His wide palms could no longer clamp down on the Burial of Heaven sword. Bam! The Heaven Burier sword fiercely slashed down and struck his broad head, causing a loud bang that sounded like muffled thunder to erupt. The dragon subduing General's head was covered with dense black scales and a thick layer of bones. However, the Burial of Heaven sword shattered dozens of dragon scales, broke through the hard and sturdy bones, and embedded itself in his head. 100-meter-long gully appeared, and purple blood gushed out from the wound like a fountain. The heart-wrenching pain caused General Dragon, subduing, to shudder. He couldn't help but cry out in agony. He looked up at the sky and glared at Ji Tianxing with a venomous look in his eyes. Then he raised both of his palms and shot out two dark red light beams. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing decisively pulled out the sword of Burial of Heaven and placed it in front of him. Bang, bang! Amidst the loud noise, two dark red light pillars struck the Heaven Burier sword and sent him flying. The terrifying force of impact sent him flying a full 200 miles before he stopped in the sky. With great difficulty, he stabilized his body. Holding the sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands, he panted heavily. After his chaotic divine power calmed down, he once again charged towards General Dragon, subduing with his sword. At the same time, Yin Yao stood high up in the sky, looking down at General Dragon, subduing with a cold expression. She slowly waved her shadowless sword with both hands, drawing out mysterious arcs. As the sword radiance flashed, heaven and earth within a radius of tens of thousands of miles became silent and oppressive. It was as if it had been sealed. Under Yun Yao's control, the boundless power of heaven and earth gathered in the dual swords. At this moment, her white robes fluttered in the wind. She was unparalleled and holy like the reincarnation of the goddess of light. She was sacred, noble, and extremely powerful. The power of heaven and earth, the radiance of the sun and moon, yin and yang, the five elements, and the cycle of heaven and earth will never end. Great Universe Sword. Yun Yao was expressionless as she shouted in a sacred and dignified tone. As her voice fell, she held the shadowless dual swords with both hands and slashed at General Dragon, subduing. Two huge universe swords instantly appeared in the sky. One was black and the other was white. At that moment, General Dragon subduing was under unparalleled pressure. It was as if he was being suppressed by heaven and earth. He couldn't move at all. He tried his best to lift his head, but his body was hunched over. The black dragon scales all over his body cracked and blood spurted out. The power of the black and white swords made him feel fear and apprehension from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't believe that this was a magical technique that a martial god could use. Damn it, only a true god can use such a magical technique. Didn't Yin Yao just break through to the martial god realm? How could she have mastered such a terrifying magical technique? These thoughts flashed through General Dragon, subduing's mind. He was extremely puzzled, but now wasn't the time to think about this. It was more important to stay alive. He hurriedly curled up his body. The black dragon scales all over his body moved rapidly, forming a sturdy and thick armor to protect his body. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and roared furiously. Endless bloody light burst out from his body and formed a bloody shield. The great Qinkuan sword finally landed just as the blood-red barrier was formed. Kaboom! A thunderous sound exploded in the sky, shaking tens of thousands of miles. The huge universe sword instantly shattered the bloody shield and slashed down on General Dragon subduing's body. The sturdy and thick black dragon scales were shattered by the giant's sword on the spot, splashing out countless fragments. A stream of purple hot blood gushed out like a water column. Under the illumination of the white light, it bloomed with a brilliant purple light. Roar! The incomparable pain caused General Dragon, subduing to involuntarily, let out an earth-shattering howl. He was suppressed by the great universe sword. He fell from the sky and smashed onto the ground, causing smoke and dust to fly up. He created a huge pit with a radius of 100 miles in the ruins that had been razed to the ground. Endless dust rained down, drowning his body. Ji Tianqing was stunned by such a terrifying scene. He looked at Yun Yao in disbelief. I can't believe that Yao Yao can use such a monarch-level magical technique when she is only a martial god. It's really terrifying. Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. With his eyesight and knowledge, he could tell that the great universe sword was a monarch-level magical technique. If a monarch-level magical technique had been used, it would have been able to split half a continent. Ji Tianqing was shocked. Yun Yao, who was high up in the sky, looked calm. It was as if she was used to it. She frowned and looked down. Her gaze passed through the smoke and dust and stared at the deep pit on the ground. Suddenly, she saw something strange in the deep pit. She frowned and shouted coldly, "Dragon subduing. At this point, you still want to run away." As she shouted, she rushed into the deep pit and stabbed General Dragon, subduing with her two swords. General Dragon, subduing, didn't struggle to get up after he fell into the deep pit. He took out a pitch-black disc and released a dark red beam of light into the disc. Instantly, the round plate emitted a bright, bloody light. Circles of ripples lit up and protected him. He grabbed a black stone with his left hand and absorbed its divine power. Swoosh! There was a flash of light, and General Dragon subduing's huge body was sucked into the black disc. In the next moment, the black disc flashed with a bloody light. It teleported 2,000 miles and disappeared. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's expressions changed. A cold light flashed in their eyes. Damn it, he still has a trump card. Chase. The two of them looked at each other and used their teleportation divine power without hesitation. They also teleported 2,000 miles away to chase after General Dragon's subduing. At the same time, they cast the heaven-capturing dragon palm. Shwa! Golden light blossomed from their bodies as they raised their other hand at the same time. Their 5 fingers stretched out in front of them. Immediately, 2 gigantic palms as large as mountains and shining with golden light flew towards the black disk at lightning speed. Back then, when Kenshin was guiding Luo Shui in her cultivation, he had imparted this ultimate skill to her. Yin Yao had fused with Luo Shui's soul, so she naturally remembered this matter. At this critical juncture, it was the most appropriate move to use. 2 gigantic golden palms that blotted out the sky were about to grab the pitch-black disk from the left and right. At this moment, the dragon-subduing general finally reacted. Perhaps his injuries were too severe and he didn't want to waste any more time. He just wanted to get rid of Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao as soon as possible. Or perhaps it was the power of the heaven-capturing dragon palm that forced him to escape from the 5-element world. He resolutely cast the forbidden divine power and didn't hesitate to sacrifice 2,000 years of his lifespan. He released surging divine power and infused it into the divine array of the disk. Instantly, the disk size expanded by 10 times. A circle of sharp sawtooth appeared on the edge of the disk as it shone with a dazzling red light. Shwa! The entire disk turned dark red, like a huge fireball. With a crisp cracking sound, a huge gap was instantly torn open in the sky. With a flash of red light, the disk passed through the gap in space and entered the dark space. It was a stretch of void about 5,000 miles thick. At the edge was a huge and sturdy golden barrier. The dazzling golden barrier was the god seal that had been placed down since ancient times. This stretch of void about 5,000 miles wide was a vacuum zone. It was filled with pitch-black wind and dark, red, heavenly fire. Even martial gods didn't dare to stay in this area for too long. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. As for martial sages, once they entered this area, they would most likely die. The experts of the martial world called this vacuum zone the heavenly wind and fire layer. This was the protective layer between the 5-element world and the void. The creatures from the outside world had to first break through the golden barrier, then the heavenly wind and fire layer. Finally, they had to break through the space barrier before they could enter the 5-element world. Chua! The disk surrounded by flames shuttled rapidly through the heavenly wind and fire layer, heading straight for the golden barrier thousands of miles away. Along the way, there were dozens of whirlpools of astral winds that were wreaking havoc as they rushed over. However, the disk was very agile. It dodged left and right and actually dodged those whirlpools of wind. Apart from that, there were also dark, red, heavenly flames that covered the sky and earth. They poured down like a flood and drowned the round disk. But the disk's defense was extremely sturdy. It resisted the burning of the heavenly fire and rushed out unscathed. In comparison, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's situation wasn't so easy. Seeing General Dragon subduing enter the heavenly wind and fire layer, the two of them chased after him without hesitation. As soon as they entered the heavenly wind and fire layer, the two of them encountered extremely hot waves of heavenly fire. Yun Yao relied on the defense of the dark gold divine armor to forcefully pass through the waves of heavenly fire and wasn't hurt. Ji Tianxing also unleashed his divine power and pushed the defense of his divine body to the maximum. The power of the thunder god's body and the heaven-connecting sword body were fully displayed at this moment. Even though he passed through the waves of heavenly fire, he was unharmed. However, as soon as the two of them passed through a few waves of heavenly fire, they were surrounded by more than 10 whirlpools of wind. The two of them dodged and teleported continuously. After expending a large amount of divine power and mental energy, they finally dodged the attacks of the whirlpools. Only then did they realize that General Dragon Subduing had already escaped far away. The two of them were still 1,500 miles away from the Golden Barrier, but General Dragon Subduing had already reached it. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's eyes narrowed, and their hearts were in their throats. The two of them prayed in their hearts, hoping that the Golden Barrier was strong enough to block General Dragon Subduing. At the very least, it would be good if they could buy some time and let General Dragon Subduing spend more time. As long as General Dragon Subduing couldn't escape, the two of them had absolute confidence that they could kill General Dragon Subduing here. However, their prayers didn't have any effect. The red light emitted from the disc was extremely dazzling. Its power was also pushed to the maximum, and it started to spin at an extraordinary speed. Crack! Boundless divine power exploded from the disc and crashed into the Golden Barrier. Instantly, a huge crack appeared on the Golden Barrier. Swoosh! Flames bloomed, and golden light burst forth. The disc actually passed through the Golden Barrier and escaped into the void. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's eyes widened in anger. Anger and indignation surged in their hearts. However, it was already too late for them to stop it. Outside the Golden Barrier was the vast and boundless void. It was cold and dead. To General Dragon Subduing, the boundless void was the sea, and he was the dragon that had escaped into the sky. End of chapter. Chapter 2490. Swoosh! The disc flickered with a red light, like a meteor streaking across the sky, and soon disappeared into the darkness. Inside the disc, there was a dark alternate dimension. The dragon Subduing general laid on a piece of barren land, completely exhausted. He panted heavily, and a look of joy appeared on his face as if he had just survived a calamity. It's not without reason that my race dominated the universe and swept through hundreds of worlds. Without the tether space disk, how could we travel through space and come and go as we please? General Dragon Subduing muttered to himself, his lips curling into a smug sneer. However, the sneer at the corner of his mouth quickly disappeared, and his expression became gloomy. He struggled to open his eyes and sized up his body that was riddled with scars and broken into pieces. His eyes flashed with monstrous hatred. It's been close to 1,000 years since I've suffered such terrible injuries. I was so close to being split in half and turned into minced meat. Ji Tianxing, that bastard, and Yun Yao, that bitch. I'll remember this. I'll make a comeback very soon, trample on you, and kill you thousands of times. General Dragon Subduing roared with hatred. His voice was hoarse and weak. His injuries were too severe. In order to use the tether space disk to escape, he had used a forbidden ability. Now, the power of the ability had dissipated, and he had suffered a backlash. Not only did he lose consciousness, but his body was also collapsing. His power had completely dissipated. He fell into a state of unconsciousness, like a pile of lifeless rotten meat, quietly lying on the wasteland. However, the tether space disk divine formation was automatically activated, driving the disk to continue flying into the depths of the void. When Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao passed through the heavenly wind and fire layer and reached the golden light barrier, it was already too late. The tether space disk had already passed through the gap and entered the vast void. The 100 feet long gap in the golden light barrier was quickly healing. Ji Tianxing instinctively flew toward that gap, wanting to enter the void and continue chasing after General Dragon Subduing. However, Yun Yao pulled him back and dissuaded him with a serious expression. Tianxing, forget it. The dragon Subduing general's divine weapon was clearly able to traverse through space. It was a divine weapon that was specially used to save one's life and escape. You entered the void with your physical body. How could you possibly catch up to him? Ji Tianxing also understood this point. He even thought that if he chased too far, he would not be able to return to the Five Elements world if he used up too much of his divine power. However, he was still unwilling to give up. There was a ball of fire burning in his chest. Damn it! We can only blame ourselves for not having a powerful divine artifact. Otherwise, we would be able to keep him here. Yun Yao understood his feelings. She comforted him with a gentle expression. Forget it. In the five elements world, how can there be any powerful divine weapon? Although we weren't able to kill the dragon subduing General, we severely injured him and forced him to flee. In the short term, he definitely wouldn't dare to return. Moreover, if General Fu Long escaped, the Heaven Punisher's invasion plan would be ruined. We have to make the best use of our time to eliminate the remaining Heaven Punisher warriors. Ji Tianxing suppressed his anger and unwillingness and nodded. That's right. There should be close to 2,000 surviving Heaven Punishers. They are scattered across the territories of the Tianju and Luo Shui divine kingdoms, and there are also some within Tianju Mountain and the 72 cities. We have to surround and eliminate them as soon as possible. We cannot let them escape. The Shenwu continent is too vast, and those warriors are all martial saints. If they hide, there will be endless trouble in the future. That's right. Only by eliminating those Heaven Punishers can the crisis be truly resolved. Yin Yao nodded in agreement. The two did not waste any more time. They passed through the astral wind and fire layer and flew back. By the time they left the astral wind and fire layer and returned to the five elements world, the gap in the golden barrier had already closed. The giant spatial crack in the sky was also mending at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao flew south, and along the way, they encountered a dozen or so black-armored warriors who were fleeing in panic. Naturally, the two of them unleashed their divine abilities and killed those warriors in an instant. Not long after, the two of them returned to the vicinity of Luotian Mountain. The once sacred and majestic Luotian Mountain had now been reduced to ruins and no longer existed. Its fate had been the same as Tianju Mountains. The two of them waited in the ruins for a while before Ji Ku and martial god Tai Hao returned. Seeing that the two of them were safe and sound, Ji Ku and Tai Hao looked relieved and hurriedly asked about the situation. Big brother Tianxing, senior sister, it's good that you're fine. Where's General Long Fu? Senior, is General Long Fu dead? Was he killed by you? Faced with their expectant gazes, Ji Tianxing calmly shook his head and explained, Unfortunately, we were unable to capture him. Although he was heavily injured, he had a life-saving artifact and escaped from the five elements world into the void. So that's what happened? Jiku revealed a regretful expression and frowned. Tai Hao also frowned and said worriedly, What should we do? Now that General Long Fu has escaped with heavy injuries, he will definitely come back to seek revenge. If he comes back with a large group of experts, how will we stop him? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a solemn expression, There will be a way when the car reaches the mountain, and the boat will cross the bridge when the boat reaches the bridge. It's useless to worry now. The most important thing now is to eliminate the remaining Heaven Punisher soldiers as soon as possible. Ji Ku and Tai Hao both understood that the Heaven Punisher soldiers were all martial sages. 2 or 3 of them were enough to cause chaos in an empire and were extremely dangerous. Therefore, the 2 of them looked at Ji Tianxing and listened to his arrangements. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and ordered, Tai Hao, lead your divine guards to the heavens in divine nation and exterminate the Heaven Punisher warriors. Also, mobilize your scouts to monitor the entire continent and grasp the movements of the Heaven Punisher soldiers. Marshal God Tai Hao understood his intentions and hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed, saying, Tai Hao understands. Farewell. After bowing, he did not waste any time and hurriedly turned to leave to carry out his mission. Ji Tianxing looked at Ji Ku and Yun Yao and said, Yao Yao, Kuku, the 2 of you stay in the Luo Shui divine kingdom and eliminate the remaining Heaven Punisher soldiers. After this matter is over, quickly restore the rule of the Luo Shui divine kingdom and maintain the peace and stability of the divine kingdom. Hearing him say this, Ji Ku and Yun Yao guessed that he was definitely going to act alone and leave for a period of time. The 2 of them asked in unison, Tianxing, where are you going? Big brother Tianxing, are you going to act alone again? Ji Tianxing did not hide it and nodded, saying, That's right. I'm going to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains and the 72 cities to eliminate the Heaven Punisher soldiers. Also, I'm going to the North Underworld Mountain to completely eliminate the threat. Completely eliminate the threat? Big Brother Tianxing, are you going to completely eliminate the demon race? The two women were stunned for a moment and revealed looks of disbelief. Tianxing's expression was cold as he said solemnly, "That's right. There are good and bad people in every race on the continent. Only the demon race is an exception. None of them are good people. The demon race's body, blood, and soul are filled with slaughter, war, and plunder. They do not deserve to live in this world." End of chapter. Chapter 2491. Whether it was on the Tianxin continent or on the Shenwu continent, Tianxing had been harmed by the demons. The demons' savagery, bloodthirstiness, tyranny, and greed had all been vividly displayed. Every time the demons started a war, they would slaughter hundreds of millions of people. They were a race that only knew how to kill and plunder, and they viewed all living things as prey and food. Tianxing naturally wanted to destroy the demons and completely eliminate all potential threats. Otherwise, new demon saints and demon gods would emerge after the demons had been dormant for thousands of years. At that time, the Shenwu continent would be plunged into misery and suffering. Yin Yao and Ji Ku both understood what he meant, and they nodded in agreement. After all, Ji Ku had recovered some of his memories from his previous life. Yin Yao had inherited the memories of Luo, Shui, and Yao Guang, so she was like a deity with an even more indifferent temperament. To the high and mighty god lords and god kings, destroying a star or a continent was a common occurrence. Tianxing, you should go. Be careful. Brother Tianxing, even if you're going to act alone, don't forget to send us a message. Yin Yao and Ji Ku both reminded Tianxing and waved goodbye to him. Tianxing nodded and hugged both of them before turning around and flying away. 3 days later, Tianxing returned to the Tianzhu Mountains. The land within a radius of 10 million kilometers was under the rule of the Heaven Punishers. The leaders of more than 300 cities and tribes had been planted with a secret soul-controlling technique by the Heaven Punishers. Every city had hundreds of thousands of commoners and martial artists who had been enslaved by the Heaven Punishers. They had been forced to mine, plant spirit herbs, and plunder cultivation resources day and night. Every city had been sealed off, and martial artists and commoners were not allowed to enter or leave without permission. They lived a life of darkness, as if they were prisoners. There were more than 100 Heaven Punishers guarding this region. Half of them were gathered in the Heaven Punishing Palace in the ruins of the Tianzhu Mountains. This majestic and dignified Heaven Punishing Palace was the ruling center of the Tianzhu Mountains. Not only was it heavily guarded, but it also gathered the resources that had been plundered from various cities. It was truly a place with wealth that could rival a country. In the evening, the sun was setting and the cold wind was blowing. Tianxing stood on top of the clouds, looking down at the Palace of Heaven Punishing. His face was indifferent and his eyes were cold. He observed for a while and saw that the Palace of Heaven Punishing was still operating as usual. He couldn't help but sneer. It has only been 3 days. It would appear that these Heaven Punishing clan's warriors still do not know that General Fu Long has fled in defeat. He muttered to himself, then raised his right hand, formed an incantation gesture, and pointed at the sky. Sword! Instantly, a formless divine power shot up into the sky, triggering the power of the stars. Immediately, densely packed silver light spots lit up high in the sky. There were as many as 10,000 of them. There were tens of thousands of starry swords, each of which was thousands of feet long and possessed unparalleled divine might. Swish! Swish! Tens of thousands of starry swords fell from the sky like a meteor shower. In the blink of an eye, a radius of 300 miles was covered by the starry sword rain. The tens of thousands of guards outside the Palace of Heaven Punishing and the dozens of Heaven Punishing warriors inside the palace were all caught off guard. They had no idea that death was upon them. Boom! 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 In the next instant, the starry sword rain fell from the sky, drowning the entire Palace of Heaven Punishing. The defensive divine array of the Palace of Heaven Punishing was instantly shattered. Immediately after, the majestic palace was blasted into smithereens. Thousands of guards were smashed into pieces. Endless dust, gravel, and pieces of flesh and blood flew everywhere, covering hundreds of miles of land. The entire area was in chaos. The palace and houses collapsed into ruins. The ground within a radius of 1,000 miles shook violently, and countless gullies appeared. Tianxing stood in the sky with an indifferent expression, looking down at the scene of heaven and earth shattering without any pity. The dust and screams that covered the sky lasted for a full 100 breaths before dissipating. After the starry sword rain, the Palace of Heaven Punishing was completely destroyed, leaving behind only broken walls and gullies. Tens of thousands of guards have been smashed into pieces, and 12 Heaven Punishing clan warriors have been killed by the starry sword rain. However, there were still 37 Heaven Punishing clan warriors in black armor in the ruins. They were screaming in pain or running away in panic. Even though they were not dead, they were all heavily injured. They were covered in blood and had lost limbs. Tianxing's spiritual sense spread out, enveloping an area of 2,000 miles and sealing off the area. No one could escape his probing and searching. Then he raised his hands and sent out countless dazzling golden sword lights at the surviving Heaven Punishing clan warriors. Swish, 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 swish. The sword lights cut through the sky, piercing through the dust and accurately stabbing the 37 Heaven Punishing clan warriors. Boom, boom, boom. The heaven-destroying warriors immediately exploded into thousands of pieces of flesh and blood, their bones and bodies shattered. The screams and roars of rage came to an abrupt end. The world was silent. Only the endless dust drifted down quietly. Tianxing looked down at the ruins, his sharp eyes searching. If there were any survivors, they would not be able to escape his detection. A moment later, he suddenly raised his eyebrows, and a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. Naturally, there was not a single survivor in the ruins. However, his spiritual sense had discovered that there was a secret room hidden under the rubble, protected by a divine formation. After the rain of swords, the divine formation had been destroyed, but the secret room was undamaged. Tianxing was curious. With a flash, he burrowed underground and arrived before the door to the secret room. The pitch-black secret room had been forged from special metal. It was abnormally tough, comparable to a low-quality divine artifact. Tianxing took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and slashed at the pitch-black door. Clang! With a loud sound, the door that had been split in two fell to the ground. Tianxing stepped into the secret chamber. His gaze pierced through the darkness and saw that this secret chamber, with a radius of 100 meters, was actually a warehouse. The secret room was filled with shelves, and there was a pitch-black box in each one. There were more than 3,000 black treasure boxes in the secret room. Tianxing looked around. He saw that each box was inscribed in the language of the Heaven Punishing clan, and they recorded some information. Unfortunately, Tianxing could not read the language of the Heaven Punishing clan. He was too lazy to study the words. He used his divine power to break the array on the box and forcibly opened it. What he didn't expect was that the interior of the treasure box was a storage space with a radius of 30,000 meters. It was filled with superior quality and supreme quality spiritual stones, various herbs, and ores. When he saw the cultivation resources, he immediately understood. These are the cultivation resources that the Heaven Punishing clan has plundered from the cities. It was true that the Heaven Punishing clan had enslaved hundreds of millions of people in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and used tens of millions of slaves to collect cultivation resources. In less than a year, the Heaven Punishing clan had plundered cultivation resources worth more than 100 billion spiritual stones. The cultivation resources collected from the cities would be sent to the Heaven Punishing Palace for temporary storage. When a number of resources accumulated to a certain extent, and you would personally escort them to the dragon subduing general. The cultivation resources in this secret room had been accumulated over 3 months, and they were worth about 20 billion spiritual stones. According to tradition, and you would come to the heaven-punishing palace half a month ago to transport these resources away. However, this would never happen. Chapter 2492. 20 billion spirit stones worth of cultivation resources were enough for the disciples of Tianzhu Mountain to cultivate for a few hundred years. Following a dream, Ji Tianxing naturally would not let this opportunity slip by, and he stored all of the treasure boxes in the secret room into his spatial ring. He then left the ruins of Tianzhu Mountain and headed to the various cities to kill the Heaven's Conquerors. The remaining 40 or so Heaven's Conquerors were distributed among the various cities and were responsible for supervising the slaves as they collected resources. Ji Tianxing's speed was very fast, and killing the Heaven's Conquerors was a simple task for him. However, the Heaven's Conquerors were too scattered. He had spent half a month to kill 42 Heaven's Conquerors. There were also 7 Heaven's Conquerors, who had long since escaped upon hearing that the palace had been destroyed. Even with Ji Tianxing's strength and methods, finding the 7 Heaven's Conquerors on Shenwu continent was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Helpless, he could only give up on searching and rush to the 72 cities as quickly as possible. There were only 60 or so Heaven's Conquerors guarding the 72 cities. They had long since received news that General Fu Long had been defeated and that the palace had been destroyed. By the time Ji Tianxing arrived at the 72 cities, the 60 Heaven's Conquerors had already discussed a countermeasure. They could not escape the 5 Elements realm, so they could only split into 3 groups and quietly flee the 72 cities. One group fled to Dark North Mountain, another to the Sky Sea in the east, and the last to the Ruins of God in the west. As long as they could avoid Ji Tianxing's pursuit and wait for the situation to pass, they could try to contact each other again. Of course, they had plundered countless cultivation resources from the 72 cities. There were still 10 billion spirit stones worth of resources that they had not sent away in time. Before they fled, the 3 groups had divided the 10 billion spirit stones equally. This method was indeed effective, and Ji Tianxing found it very difficult to deal with. He searched more than 40 cities, but he could not find a single Heaven's Conqueror. In the end, through some clues, he caught up with the team. There were 24 people in this group, and they were desperately fleeing towards the endless Sky Sea. When they reached the border of the 72 cities and were about to enter the Luo Shui kingdom, they were stopped by Ji Tianxing. After a fierce battle, all 24 Heaven's Conquerors were killed by Ji Tianxing. Cultivation resources worth more than 3 billion spirit stones fell into Ji Tianxing's hands. In addition, Ji Tianxing had used the soul-searching secret technique to devour the souls and memories of a few heaven-hunting warriors. As a result, he knew the Heaven's Conqueror's plan and the escape routes of the other 2 groups. He then turned around and flew west, rushing to the Ruins of God as fast as he could. 7 days later, he chased into the Ruins of God. After many searches and searches, he finally found that team. A total of 26 soldiers were mercilessly killed by him. Not a single one of them managed to escape. He found more than 3 billion worth of resources from the bodies of the soldiers of the heavenly expedition. After dealing with this group of people, Ji Tianxing rushed to the North Underworld Mountain. 20 days. In the Ghost Desert located in the hinterland of the North Underworld Mountains. It was late at night. The desert was bone-chilling cold, but there was no howling wind. The world was silent. At this moment, a pitch-black, cold shadow quietly swept across the desert and sped toward the north. If one looked closely, they would discover that the black shadow was not demonic fog. It was 21 Heaven's Conquerors in black armor. The group walked side by side, quietly flying across the desert. Their expressions were grave, and their eyes were filled with anxiety and worry. One of the Heaven's Conquerors could not suppress the fear in his heart. He asked the black-armored leader, "Captain, this desert is so dangerous. Are we really going to pass through it?" 5 warriors had already left without saying goodbye, quietly leaving the group. "If you insist on going your own way, I'm afraid everyone will be dispirited and run away." The leader's eyes turned cold, and he said coldly, Don't mention those 5 cowards. They're all useless trash. Even if Lord General is defeated and our race's momentum is gone, as Heaven's conquerors, we cannot lose our fighting spirit and courage. This desert is called the Ghost Desert. I heard Lord and you say a long time ago that this is a forbidden area for the demon race. We came here because it is said that there is a spatial crack in the depths of the Ghost Desert that leads to the outer realm. As long as we find that crack, we can leave this world and cross the void to return to our homeland. Hearing his words, the other Heaven's conquerors were energized, and their eyes shone with hope. Everyone's spirits were lifted, and their faces were filled with anticipation. So that's how it is. No wonder Captain wanted to escape into the North Underworld Mountain and insisted on entering this desert. We misunderstood Captain. He really wants to take us away. Everyone, cheer up. We must find the spatial crack as soon as possible and try to escape from this world before Tianxing catches up. The news quickly spread among the group. Many Heaven's conquerors were in high spirits, and their despondency and despair were swept away. However, at this moment, the leader's expression changed drastically, and he could not help but cry out in alarm. Not good. Stop. The sudden cold shout shocked all the Heaven's conquerors. The group, which had been galloping, immediately stopped in the air above the desert. Everyone was puzzled, and they followed the leader's gaze to the front. In the air above the desert, hundreds of miles away, there was a white figure looming in the black fog. The white figure was a handsome young man from a human tribe. He had a jade belt around his waist, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. He exuded a sacred aura. After seeing the young man's appearance, many Heaven's conquerors were horrified, and they shouted in panic. Is that Tianxing? It must be him. It's over. He finally caught up with us. How did he know that we are in the Ghost Desert? Did someone leak the secret? Just as everyone was at a loss and filled with fear, the young man in the white robe stepped into the air, raised his palms, and scattered sword radiance all over the sky. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than 3,000 dazzling golden sword radiance rained down like a rain of arrows, covering hundreds of miles in radius. The 21 Heaven's conquerors' faces changed drastically, and they roared in anger. Get out of the way. Everyone run. Don't hesitate, or we will all die here. Following the roars, the Heaven's conquerors scattered in all directions, desperately trying to escape. However, the speed of their escape was too slow compared to the speed of the sword radiance. Bam, bam, bam. In a series of loud bangs, all the Heaven's conquerors were hit by the sword radiance, and blood and flesh splattered all over the sky. 19 Heaven's conquerors were killed on the spot, and their bodies were smashed into pieces. Only 2 of them were lucky enough to survive. Their legs or bodies had been chopped off, and they were still alive. However, as the sword radiance struck again, the 2 of them were also killed and turned into a pile of debris. Chapter 2493. In the heart of North Underworld Mountain, Demon Holy City. It was noon, but the huge holy city was shrouded in black clouds and was deathly silent. A year ago, the holy city was rebuilt. More than 800,000 demons gathered in the holy city and worked hard to revive the demon race. Later, the major tribes selected nearly 1 million demon warriors to come to the holy city to reinforce the front line. However, with the defeat of the demon race army and the death of the ancestor demon god Ling Xian, the holy city became extremely desolate. Without the protection of leaders and experts, the demon race became a pile of loose sand without any cohesion. More than half of the 1 million demons in the holy city had left one after another. A small number hid in deserted places, while the majority returned to their respective tribes. Only 700,000 or so demons remained in the holy city, quietly lying dormant. They still had the illusion that the humans could not counterattack North Underworld Mountain, or that the humans were busy fighting for power and rebuilding their homeland, and did not have the time to seek revenge. As long as they were allowed to rest for a few decades, they would be able to nurture new leaders and revive the demon race. However, with the arrival of Tianxing, all of this would end. Ji Tianxing appeared in the sky above the holy city, in the middle of the black clouds, looking down at the holy city that was 100 miles wide. The surging demon Qi could not corrode his divine body and had no effect on him. He expressionlessly raised his palms, activated the surging divine power, and sent out 2 giant golden palms that blotted out the sky. The sudden appearance of the giant golden palms dispelled the demon Qi and darkness, like the scorching sun in the sky. The area within 1,000 miles was filled with dazzling golden light, sacred and glorious. The hundreds of thousands of demons hiding in the holy city were awakened by the sacred golden light. Feeling the terrifying divine might descend, everyone was terrified and filled with despair. But they could do nothing, and they did not have time to escape. The next moment, the 2 giant golden palms slammed into the holy city, covering an area of 200 miles. Boom! With a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens, the holy city was instantly reduced to ruins, and smoke and dust filled the sky. The ground within 1,000 miles trembled violently, and countless ravines opened up. 95% of the hundreds of thousands of demons in the holy city were killed on the spot. Only the demons who were hiding in underground secret rooms and caverns, protected by powerful formations, could survive. Of course, Ji Tianxing's divine sense swept across the 200 miles of ruins and clearly detected the injured survivors. He raised his hands again and made a hand seal to activate the heavenly fire. Above the firmament, a loud rumbling sound immediately resounded. Endless dark, red heavenly flames poured down like a flood and drowned the ruins of the holy city. Instantly, the ground within a few hundred miles was scorched, and dark red lava surged out and flowed wantonly. Those demons hiding underground were immediately reduced to ashes. Ji Tianxing withdrew his cold gaze and turned to leave expressionlessly. A moment later, Ji Tianxing appeared above Biming Palace. The Biming Palace, which had been rebuilt a year ago, stood at the peak of the towering mountain, looking gloomy and solemn. This was the holy land of the demon race, and also the highest ruling center. Back then, when the ancestral demon god occupied this place, the entire demon race was filled with ambition. Inside Biming Palace, there were 3,000 guards and 300 elites, as well as several dozen deacons and messengers. However, in the last 2 months, the demon race was leaderless, and their morale was very low. Nearly half of the guards secretly fled Biming Palace and returned to their tribes. Only a little more than 1,000 remained, silently waiting for a new leader to appear. Just now, Ji Tianxing used a secret technique to destroy the holy city of the demon race. Biming Palace was only a little more than 1,000 miles from the holy city, so it was naturally affected. The towering mountain violently shook several dozen times. Many demons saw 2 giant golden palms and the heavenly fire that blotted out the sky. The news quickly spread in the Biming Palace, causing many demons to be in an uproar. They all fled in panic. When Ji Tianxing arrived at Biming Palace, he just happened to see Biming Palace in chaos. More than 1,000 demon experts and guards were fleeing in all directions in a panic. Without hesitation, Ji Tianxing raised his palms and slammed them down. Kaboom! Another 2 giant golden palms the size of mountains fell down like golden suns, shattering Biming Palace and the entire mountain. Endless rocks and dust flew out, covering the sky for several hundred miles. 80% of the demon guards and experts were killed by the giant golden palms. Those who were lucky enough to survive were injured by the violent shock waves, falling into the ruins covered in blood. Ji Tianxing waved his sleeve and shot out a dazzling 5-color divine lightning at the vast ruins. Boom, 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 boom. The 5-color divine lightning split into 1,000 lightning pillars and struck the surviving demons. Thus, everyone was reduced to ashes and scattered ashes. Ji Tianxing's gaze passed through the ruins and looked behind Biming Palace. There was a deep abyss there, 50 miles wide, shrouded in pitch-black demon Qi. The abyss flickered with dark red light, and a poisonous bloody mist constantly poured out. Without a doubt, that was the lair of the ancestral demon god, the place where he had been in seclusion for the past 8 years, the infamous Blood Sea Abyss. Ji Tianxing strode across the sky and arrived above the Blood Sea Abyss. He released his divine sense into the abyss and saw a bottomless purple-black blood sea. It was formed from the blood essence of billions of living beings and humans. It was the evilest place in the world. Suddenly, Ji Tianxing's divine sense detected that there were several hundred demons in the depths of the blood sea, cultivating. Most of them were young demon geniuses, and a small number were older experts. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a cold light, and the corner of his mouth hooked up in a cold smile. On one hand, they're nurturing young geniuses to become future pillars of strength. On the other hand, they're nurturing older experts to choose a new leader. The demon race really refuses to give up on their evil intentions. They still want to recuperate and make a comeback. Ji Tianxing muttered a few words, then slowly raised his palms and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb, releasing a divine white light that covered the sky. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 enormous pillars of blazing white light shot out from his palms, reaching into the blood sea abyss. Instantly, the demonic mist and formation that shrouded the blood sea abyss were dispersed by the blazing white light pillars. When the purple-black blood sea encountered the divine white light, it was like snow under the scorching sun, dissipating at a visible speed. The blood sea abyss shook violently, stirring up surging waves of blood, waking up several hundred demons that were cultivating. The demon clansmen panicked. They hurriedly ran out of the blood sea, trying to escape from the abyss. However, they were all engulfed by the divine white light and quickly turned to dust. Ji Tianxing continued to release the divine white light, and the purple-black blood sea abyss was also quickly dissolving. After an entire hour, the blood sea abyss, which was dozens of kilometers deep, and a mountain of white bones at the bottom of the abyss were all purified by the divine white light. The evil demonic energy and blood soul power were all dispersed. Ji Tianxing then used the dragon elephant divine fist, blasting the abyss into pieces. After completely destroying the blood sea abyss, he turned and left. Chapter 2494. Destroying the holy city, Beiming Palace, and the blood sea abyss was only the first step of Ji Tianxing's plan. For the next 2 months, he was active in Beiming Mountain. His target was the 600 or so most powerful tribes of the demon race. These tribes had deep foundations, and their populations were at least 100,000. The dozen or so most powerful tribes had populations of over 1 million, and they had built their own cities. These were the backbone of the demon race, and every year, they could cultivate a large number of elite warriors and experts. If these tribes were not eliminated, a few demon saints and a large number of experts would be born in at most a few decades. In these 2 months, Ji Tianxing spent every day on the road and slaughtering, without any time to rest. He constantly searched for one tribe after another and used earth-shattering methods to destroy the entire tribe. Then, without stopping to rest, he rushed to the next tribe and continued his slaughter. Although the targets of his slaughter were the inhumane, cruel, and tyrannical demons. But if it were an ordinary martial god, it would be very difficult for them to have such unswerving determination and courage. In a short 2 months, he had slaughtered nearly 200 million demons. He would definitely feel tired and annoyed. He might even be unable to bear it and develop a heart demon. But Ji Tianxing was different. His hatred for the demon race was deep in his bones and soul. If he did not thoroughly eliminate this disaster, it would leave behind a sore point that would affect his future cultivation of the divine path. Moreover, he was once the king of gods who stood at the peak of the starry sky. Destroying a star or a world in the blink of an eye was something that happened all the time. His understanding of heaven and earth and life far surpassed that of ordinary gods. He naturally would not blame himself for this matter and would not be soft-hearted. That evening, Ji Tianxing left Beiming Mountain. He stood at the peak of the sea of clouds, bathed in the dusky sunset, and revealed an expression of relief. More than 600 powerful demon tribes have been destroyed by my own hands. From now on, the demon race will only have 3,000 weak tribes left, and they will no longer be able to stir up trouble and harm the various races of the continent. This sore point has finally been eliminated, and it is enough to comfort the 1 billion living beings who died under the demon's blade. He had slaughtered 200 million demons, which was equivalent to cutting down half of the demon race's population. This was absolutely a disaster for the demon race. Unfortunately, the Dark North Mountain was too big. If he wanted to get rid of the remaining 200 million demons, it would take him at least a year. He didn't want to waste time on these trivial matters, so he decided to leave the finishing work to the martial artists of the continent. From today onwards, the North Underworld Mountain will no longer be a forbidden area feared by all races. Instead, it will be a rather dangerous training ground. Martial practitioners of various races who wanted to explore and gain experience could do so at North Underworld Mountain. If the armies and guards of the various divine kingdoms wanted to train their troops in actual combat, they could also do so at Dark North Mountain. In this way, not only could they continuously weaken the power of the devil race, but they could also temper the strength of the various races' cultivators. Ji Tianxing decided to announce this to the entire Shenwu continent, and they would proceed according to this plan. Only in this way could the demons be completely exterminated. At the very least, they would be able to suppress the demons for tens of thousands of years, preventing them from rising again. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to Yun Yao, inquiring about the situation in the Luo Shui divine nation. He waited in the sea of clouds for a while before receiving Yun Yao's reply. Tianxing, after 3 months of hard work, Ku and I have killed more than 900 soldiers of the Heaven's Crusaders. According to our estimates, there are around 1,000 soldiers of the Heaven's Crusaders in the Luo Shui divine nation. Only a few dozen of them received the news in advance and quietly escaped. In addition, I've already gathered the 3 sage emperors, as well as over 1,000 city lords and leaders of various powers. They are all former subordinates of the divine nation. I'm currently using the power of the divine radiance pearl to remove the soul controlling technique from their bodies one by one. If we want to restore the Luo Shui divine nation's rule and order, we still have a long way to go, and we'll need at least another year. Yin Yao's voice rang out in Ji Tianxing's mind, crisp, clean, and decisive. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment before sending her a message to console her. The destruction of a divine nation is a catastrophe, and it won't be easy to restore order. We're already mentally prepared for this. Fortunately, the Shenwu continent's crisis has been resolved, so you don't have to be anxious. Just proceed as planned. I still have some matters to take care of, so I'll come back to find you in 10 days. After sending Yun Yao a message, he then sent a message to Martial God Taihao to ask about the situation in the Heaven and Divine Nation. After 15 minutes, Martial God Taihao finally replied with a report. 95% of the Heaven's Crusaders in the Heaven and Divine Nation have been killed by Martial God Taihao, and they were currently conducting a final sweep. Roughly 50 or so Heaven's Crusaders had fled the Heaven and Divine Nation in advance, and their whereabouts were unknown. After Ji Tianxing learned of the situation, he instructed Martial God Taihao to continue his sweep and not slack off. Whoosh! His communication jade transformed into a beam of light that disappeared into the horizon. Ji Tianxing stared at the sky and muttered, "There are about 100 surviving Heaven's Crusaders. If 100 martial saints were to gather together, they would be able to destroy half of a divine nation. Fortunately, the Heaven's Crusaders have all become frightened birds, and they've scattered in all directions to hide in various parts of the continent. It will be very difficult for them to gather together in the short term, and they won't dare to cause any trouble." After saying that, he temporarily put this matter aside and summoned the small golden tower. Whoosh! A golden light flashed, and his figure disappeared. The next moment, he returned to the Jiuqian 10 Absolute's tower and appeared on the 5th floor. He did not go to the 6th floor to distort space-time. Instead, He directly activated the Origin Divine Formation and descended to the first floor. Nearly 1,000 disciples of Tianju Mountain lived and cultivated here, and they were already used to the environment. After Ji Tianxing descended, Huanglong Daoist sensed his aura and hurriedly rushed out to welcome him. He did not waste any time and immediately ordered, Huanglong, gather all the disciples at the plaza. Master has an important announcement to make. Huanglong Daoist did not ask any questions and hurriedly went to carry out the order. About a quarter of an hour later, over 1,000 disciples were gathered in the square. Everyone stared at Ji Tianxing respectfully, and their eyes were filled with anticipation. Ji Tianxing looked around and announced in a dignified tone, now that the Heavens Crusaders and the Devil race have been destroyed, the Shenwu continent has regained its peace. Everyone, there is no need to hide here anymore. Immediately return to Tianju Mountain and rebuild the sacred land of martial arts. We will spread the might of our sect. This sudden piece of good news was like a bolt from the blue, and it stunned everyone. Everyone was filled with shock, and their eyes widened in disbelief. It was only after a long time that they cheered. No one could believe that the cruel and tyrannical Devil race and the tyrannical Heavens Crusaders had both been destroyed. And all of this was a miracle created by Ji Tianxing. Everyone was immersed in shock, excitement, and pride. 2 hours later, everyone was ready to leave. Ji Tianxing led everyone out of the tower and returned to the ruins of God. Next, Huanglong Daoist will lead everyone back to Tianju Mountain and rebuild the sacred land of martial arts. It has been a long time since I asked for a recommendation vote, so please vote for me. Thank you. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2495. Ji Tianxing was very assured that the matter of rebuilding Tianju Mountain would be left to the Huanglong Daoist. He watched as everyone left, and only after they had disappeared into the horizon did he turn around and fly back to the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom. 2 days later, he returned to the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom and appeared at the ruins of Luotian Mountain. Back when Ji Tianxing and General Fu Long had fought here, the aftermath of the battle had destroyed Luotian Mountain, and everything within 500 kilometers had been reduced to ruins. Now, more than 3 months had passed, and Luotian Mountain had long since been rebuilt. Rows upon rows of palaces had been rebuilt at the peak of the majestic mountain, and it had been restored to its former appearance. When Ji Tianxing saw Yun Yao, she was in the study and busy with work. One messenger after another entered and left the study in an endless stream, passing down her orders. When she saw that Ji Tianxing had returned, Yun Yao hurriedly stopped what she was doing and asked with concern, "Tianxing, you're finally back. Did the operation go smoothly?" Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, "Everything went smoothly. I killed all the soldiers of Tianju Mountain and the 72 cities, and only a few managed to escape. In addition, I also destroyed more than 600 powerful tribes in Dark North Mountain." After hearing this news, Yun Yao was both shocked and excited, as if a huge stone had been lifted from her heart. This news is really inspiring. If this news spreads throughout the Shenwu continent, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. Dark North Mountain has suffered such a devastating blow, and they will definitely not be able to recover. They will no longer be able to threaten the safety of the continent's various races. The two sat down and chatted for a while before Yun Yao asked, "Tianxing, the situation on the continent has stabilized, and you are fully deserving of being the strongest powerhouse. What plans do you have for the future?" Ji Tianxing already had the corresponding thoughts and plans in mind, and he answered without hesitation, "The most important thing right now is to stabilize the situation on the continent and allow the people of the various races to recuperate. 2 of the 3 divine masters have fallen, and only martial god Taihao is left. I plan to gather a few martial god realm experts at the ancient gazing platform of the ruins of God in half a month's time to discuss how to divide the factions." Yin Yao understood what he meant. She nodded in agreement and said, "That's good. Only by dividing the sphere of influence can we restore the rule of God Nation as soon as possible. Currently, Many races and forces on the continent were taking advantage of the chaos to launch wars, invade, and expand their territories. Although the scale was not large, it would still cause hundreds or even tens of millions of casualties, and it would continue for a long time. Only by establishing the rule of the Divine Kingdom can these wars be stopped. Ji Tianxing said calmly, "Continue with your work. I will inform Tai Hao, the messenger of the ruins of God, and Fairy Yuqing." Yin Yao nodded and said earnestly, "You definitely haven't rested for a moment in the past 3 months. Now that you've returned, you should rest well for a few days." Ji Tianxing agreed and returned to the Cloud Water Palace, not bothering her any longer. He took out a few communication jade slips and sent messages to Tai Hao, the messenger of the ruins of God, and Fairy Yuqing, explaining his thoughts and plans. Then, he entered the secret chamber to meditate and recuperate. 13 days passed in a flash. After meditating for so long, Ji Tianxing's spirit and strength had recovered to their peak. He ended his cultivation and opened his eyes to see 2 communication jade slips floating beside him. These 2 communication jade slips were sent by the messenger of the ruins of God and Fairy Yuqing. Ji Tianxing picked up the jade slips and used his divine sense to enter them. He quickly read the information inside. A moment later, he put away the communication jade slips and muttered to himself. As expected, he got up and walked out of the secret chamber. He met Ji Ku outside the Cloud Water Palace. Ji Ku looked travel-worn, and there was a hint of fatigue between his brows. However, when she saw Ji Tianxing, she hurriedly came over and greeted him with a smile. "Brother Tianxing, you're finally out of seclusion?" Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. He asked with concern, "Cuckoo, I heard from Yao Yao that you've been searching for the surviving soldiers of the Heavens Expedition. It's been hard on you these past few months." Ji Ku shook his head and said with a smile, "Compared to what you've done, it's not hard at all." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "It seems that you already know what happened." "Yes." Ji Ku quickly nodded and explained, "I rushed back this morning. Eldest senior sister told me." After saying that, she held Ji Tianxing's arm and said with a smile, "Let's go and find eldest senior sister. She must be waiting for us." The 2 of them rushed to the study together. Yin Yao had indeed been waiting for a long time. After the 3 of them gathered, they left Luoshan Mountain together and flew towards the ruins of God. 2 days later, the 3 of them entered the depths of the ruins of God and arrived at the ancient viewing platform. Martial God Tai Hao had been waiting here for a long time. The 4 martial gods gathered at the ancient gazing platform, and it was inevitable that they would exchange greetings. After greeting each other, Ji Tianxing began to talk about serious matters. Now that the Heavens Expedition has been defeated and the demons have suffered great losses, Shenwu continent is at peace for the time being. Today, we are gathered here to discuss the division of power. Hearing this, Yin Yao and Ji Ku nodded slightly. Martial God Tai Hao looked around and asked doubtfully, "Senior, are there only the 4 of us? Didn't you say that you informed the ruins of God and Fairy Yuqing?" Ji Tianxing waved his hand and explained, "The 2 seniors are both experts who are not of this world. They have noble character and unquestionable integrity, and they are not willing to get involved in worldly affairs or power struggles." "I see." Martial God Tai Hao nodded in understanding and smiled. "In that case, I'll leave it to you to decide." Ji Tianxing was not modest and directly said, "Shenwu continent has just experienced a catastrophe. Billions of citizens have been killed, and tens of billions have been displaced. What we need to do is to stabilize the situation as soon as possible so that the citizens can live and work in peace and recuperate. Therefore, I've decided to maintain the original power structure. The 3 divine kingdoms will continue to exist, and the original territories will remain unchanged. Taihao Divine Kingdom will remain the same, and Tianjua Divine Kingdom will be managed by me. It will be officially renamed Tianxing Divine Kingdom. As for Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, it will be managed by Yun Yao. She is the #1 goddess of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom and the rightful successor. In addition, I will deal with Tianju Mountain and the 72 cities as appropriate. After listening to Ji Tianxing's announcement, Marshal God Taihao was stunned. His eyes shone with a strange light, and he said with admiration, "Senior, you truly have the world in your heart. You are so righteous that Taihao admires you." From the day he received Ji Tianxing's message, he had already guessed the answer. He thought that Ji Tianxing would definitely unify Tianjue and Luoshui divine kingdoms and merge them with Tianju Mountain and the 72 cities. After all, this was the dream of every overlord. However, Taihao had never expected that Ji Tianxing would not be attached to power and the secular world at all, and that he would treat the position of overlord so lightly. If it were Taihao himself, he would not be able to be so carefree. Chapter 2496. Ji Tianxing's words had created a new structure for the Shenwu continent. Doing so would reduce the unrest and chaos as much as possible, allowing the situation to settle down as quickly as possible. Everything was for the sake of the common people. Although they had finished discussing important matters, Marshal God Taihao was in no hurry to leave. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze and asked, "Senior, news of you destroying Biming Palace and slaughtering 200 million demons has already spread throughout the continent. Now, all the warriors and commoners see you as their savior, and they've even set up shrines to worship you. With your methods and charisma, you only need to put in a little effort to flatten Biming Mountain and completely destroy the demons. That way, the various races will truly be at ease. I wonder, why did you hold back and let the remaining demons go?" Ji Tianxing glanced at Taihao and smiled. "Taihao, this is not just what you want to ask, but also what the leaders of the various races want to know, right?" Martial God Taihao smiled and nodded. "That's right. The entire continent is talking about this." Ji Tianxing said sincerely, "The heavenly Tao is orderly, and nothing can be too extreme. Otherwise, there will be trouble in the future. If I completely destroy the demons, the various races of the continent will have nothing to worry about. After recuperating and developing, there will be internal conflicts and disputes, which will then lead to chaos and war. However, I left half of the demons behind to remind everyone not to forget the disasters and pain brought about by war. We must cherish the peace and tranquility before us. If the various races are powerful but have no place to use their strength, then we can use Biming Mountain as a training ground to temper ourselves." After hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Marshal God Taihao came to a realization, and a look of deep reverence appeared on his face. So that's how it is. Not only will this suppress Biming Mountain and prevent the demons from rising, but it will also maintain the peace of the various races on the continent. Senior, you've truly put in a lot of thought and thought far ahead for the sake of the continent's peace. On behalf of the 12 billion citizens of the Divine Kingdom, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you." As he spoke, Marshal God Taihao bowed respectfully. Ji Tianxing raised his hand and gestured for him to rise. Then, he said in a serious tone, "Taihao, there is one more thing you must remember. Although the Heaven Punisher had been defeated and the demons were no longer a threat, that did not mean that Shenwu continent was safe. In the future, he still could not let down his guard in case the Heaven Punishers made a comeback, and General Dragon Subduing came to take revenge. In addition, continue to send people to search for the whereabouts of the Heaven-conquering warriors. Try to find the 100 or so survivors and eliminate them all." These words were not only from Marshal God Taihao, but also for Yun Yao. Both of them nodded to show that they understood. Following this, they discussed some other matters, all of which were related to the commoners of the world. An hour later, the meeting came to an end. Marshal God Taihao bid farewell and left. Yin Yao and Ji Ku returned to the Luo River God Nation, while Ji Tianxing rushed to the Heaven Extinction God Nation. For the next half a year, the four martial gods were busy and had almost no time to rest. Martial God Taihao was busy searching for and hunting down the heaven-conquering warriors. He had mobilized hundreds of thousands of divine guards and nearly 100,000 elite scouts. He personally went into action, so the results were naturally outstanding. Within half a year, he had killed more than 80 heaven-conquering warriors. The remaining 30 or so heaven-conquering warriors scattered around the continent and hid in uninhabited places, not daring to show their faces again. With Ji Ku's help, Yun Yao regained control of the Luo River God Nation. At the peak of the Luo River God Mountain, Yun Yao announced to the world that she would inherit the position of Divine Master and protect all the people of the Luo River God Nation. After inheriting the position, she selected 6 new emperors. In addition to the previous 3 divine emperors, the 9 of them each ruled the 9 great empires. Although the empires were destroyed by the flames of war, the people of the Luo River God Nation were happy. However, the people of the divine nation were overjoyed. They respected and supported Yun Yao greatly. Hundreds of millions of people invested in the reconstruction work. They were full of enthusiasm and were full of anticipation for the future. In this way, the Luo River God Nation's recovery speed increased. On the other side, Ji Tianxing was also very busy in the Heaven Extinction God Nation. He was overseeing the Heaven Extinction Peak, announcing to the world that he was the Divine Master and controlling the Tianxing God Nation. After that, he gathered countless city lords, generals, and faction leaders who had been controlled and removed the soul control technique from them in batches. Just this one matter alone had taken him 4 months of his time. After that, he selected new divine emperors to suppress the chaos in the various empires. After half a year, he finally stabilized the situation in the Tianxing God Nation and allowed the various empires to recuperate. At this point, the Xinwu continent's new structure had been established, and everything was on the right track. It was worth mentioning that the Boundless God Nation used to be the weakest of the 3 divine nations. But now, the divine kingdom of Taihao had become the most powerful divine kingdom. On this night, the moon hung high in the sky. Within the palace on Heaven Extinction Peak, the study was lit. Ji Tianxing was bent over his desk, focused on handling government affairs. At this time, someone suddenly came to the study and knocked on the door. Ji Tianxing immediately looked up and frowned at the door. All this time, anyone who entered the study would report to the Divine Master, and they would only be allowed to enter after receiving permission. No one had ever dared to knock on the door directly, as that would be an affront to the Divine Master's authority. However, when Ji Tianxing saw the figure at the door, he was stunned. "Yao Yao, why are you here?" His brows immediately relaxed, and a gentle smile appeared on his face. There was no doubt that this person was Yun Yao. She was wearing a long white dress and an incomparably luxurious jade crown. She walked into the study and came to Ji Tianxing's side. "I guess that you would be unusually busy recently, so I didn't send a message in advance. I secretly came to visit you tonight. If I had known that the situation in the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation would be even more complicated, I would have asked Cuckoo to help you." As she spoke, Yin Yao walked behind him and reached out to massage his shoulders and neck. Ji Tianxing leaned back in his large chair and closed his eyes in satisfaction. He smiled and said, "You are pregnant, so you can't overwork yourself. Cuckoo will naturally be by your side to help you. By the way, why did you suddenly come here tonight? It's not just to see me, right?" Yin Yao nodded and said in a serious tone, "There is indeed a very important matter that I have to discuss with you face to face. Currently, only Cuckoo and I know about it." "What is it?" Ji Tianxing suddenly opened his eyes, and his eyes lit up. Yin Yao took out a black stone the size of a fist and placed it in front of him. She explained, "Previously, when Ku was chasing after the Heaven's Conqueror, she killed a commander and seized some spoils of war. She found this strange stone. Cuckoo and I have studied it carefully. This stone is very strange. It looks ordinary, but it contains a lot of divine power. Moreover, this stone seems to contain the power of space." Ji Tianxing took the strange black stone and observed it carefully for a moment. He immediately frowned and revealed a look of reminiscence. Chapter 2497. "I think I've seen this black stone somewhere before." Ji Tianxing held the strange black stone with both hands and frowned as he muttered to himself. He thought for a moment and immediately recalled the scene when he had killed Ling Xian. Ling Xian's final struggle had turned into purple flames and fallen demonic qi, but it had been purified by the divine light. After that, a fist-sized black stone had fallen from the sky. Ji Tianxing knew that it was Ling Xian's remnant, and he had immediately grabbed it and placed it in his spatial ring after taking a look at it. He had thought that he would study that black stone when he had the time in the future. Who would have thought that too many things had happened, causing him to forget about that stone? Now that Yun Yao had brought it up, he finally recalled it. Thus, he rummaged through his interspatial ring for a while and found the piece of black stone. The two black stones were placed side by side, and their appearance and aura were exactly the same. Ji Tianxing frowned and said, "I also have a black stone like this. I obtained it after killing Ling Xian." Yun Yao nodded slightly and said in a serious tone, "They are indeed the same. Oh, right. Tianxing, do you still remember the scene when we surrounded General Fulong? At that time, I used the Grand Qinquan sword and severely injured General Fulong. He took out a black stone and crazily absorbed its power before taking out a disc-shaped divine weapon. With the support of that black stone, the disc-shaped divine weapon exploded with terrifying power and escaped through the world seal." After Yun Yao's reminder, Ji Tianxing immediately recalled that scene. That's right. General Fu Long also has a black stone like this. He relied on the power of this black stone to escape from the five elements realm. At this point, Ji Tianxing stared at the black stone in his hands and said with a burning gaze, "If that's the case, this stone can be used by the martial god to cultivate, and its effects are even stronger than ordinary divine stones." Ji Tianxing was very clear that divine stones were the most common cultivation resource in the god realm, and every god could not do without them. However, on the Shenwu continent, divine stones were extremely rare. At the very least, the three divine masters had never obtained a divine stone, and Ji Tianxing had never found one. As for the two black stones in his hands, not only were they filled with divine power like divine stones, they also contained powerful spatial energy. Not to mention martial gods, even true gods and heavenly gods would scramble madly for this kind of black stone. If one could have a large number of black stones to aid in one's cultivation, even a deity would be able to quickly increase his strength. From this, it could be seen how precious these two black stones were. Ji Tianxing put the two black stones on the table. He stared at Yin Yao and asked seriously, "Yao Yao, have you and Ke found any clues?" Yin Yao hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "I did get some information, but it's far from enough." Ke said with certainty that this black stone is a kind of divine stone, but it is more precious than ordinary divine stones, and its effects are more powerful. Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement. Indeed, back when I was in the God realm and the Dragon realm, I never came across such a divine stone. Could it be that General Fu Long brought it from the Heaven Punisher tribe? Yin Yao hurriedly shook her head and explained, "No. Ke used a secret soul-searching technique to strip the memories of a Heaven Punisher. She told me with certainty that this black stone does not belong to the Heaven Punisher tribe, but was mined from the Shenwu continent." Ji Tianxing's pupils shrank when he heard this, and he revealed a look of deep shock. "Mined from the Shenwu continent? How is that possible? The Shenwu continent is just a mortal world, and it doesn't even have ordinary divine stones. How could it have such a black stone?" Yin Yao nodded and said with a complicated expression, "I also feel that this is illogical, but would never lie, so I could only come to you." Ji Tianxing was silent for a long time before he sighed faintly. "Back then, I stayed in this world for too short a time, and there were many places that I did not go, let alone understand the five elements realm. Now that I think about it, there might be many unknown secrets hidden in this world." Yin Yao patted his shoulder and comforted him. "This world is not ordinary. Otherwise, why would it have been sealed by the gods? All right, don't think too much about it. Let's think about how to investigate the source of this black stone. Now that we have reached the martial god realm, the progress of our strength has become very slow. If we can find more black stones, we can become stronger even faster." Ji Tianxing nodded and said in a low voice, "That's right. General Fu Long has seen the mysterious effects of this black stone, and he will definitely not give up on such a divine item. I'm almost certain that he will rally his forces and bring a large number of powerhouses back. Thus, we need to increase our strength as quickly as possible so that we can resist General Fu Long's counterattack in the future and protect the Shenwu continent. He paused for a moment and then continued, if we want to investigate the source of this black stone, we need to first figure out where that Heaven Punisher tribe commander got this black stone. Yun Yao hurriedly replied, according to Ku, this black stone was bestowed by General Fu Long to that commander because that commander had performed a meritorious service. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and then said, thoughtfully, if that's the case, then the slaves and miners who were enslaved by the Heaven Punisher tribe must have dug out this black stone from somewhere. Then, the black stone and many other cultivation resources gathered in General Fu Long's hands. When General Fu Long discovered the powerful effects of this black stone, he used it for cultivation and healing, and he rewarded it to his subordinates who had performed a meritorious service. Yin Yao nodded in agreement. Your deduction is very reasonable. This way, the source of the black stone is limited. The Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, Heaven and Divine Kingdom, the 72 cities, and Sky Pillar Mountain are all located somewhere in these 4 territories. Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled bitterly. He said with some annoyance, it's a pity that we have been busy rebuilding the Divine Kingdoms and stabilizing the situation for the past half a year, so we didn't discover this earlier. After the Heaven Punisher tribe was defeated, the slaves and miners regained their freedom and went their separate ways. Now, trying to find out the source of the black stone from the hundreds of millions of miners is like finding a needle in a haystack. Yin Yao did not regret her decision, and she calmly comforted him. Don't worry. As long as we use the strength of 2 divine kingdoms, we will find out the source of the black stone sooner or later. If 1 year isn't enough, then we will do it in 2 years. If 2 years isn't enough, then we will do it in 5 years. The black stone is extremely important to us, so we must find the source no matter what. This is not only to help us increase our strength, but also to unravel the secrets of the Shenwu continent or the 5 Elements realm. Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a playful tone, by the way, Yao Yao, you have inherited Goddess Yao Wang's inheritance. Do you have any information about the black stone in your memories? Yin Yao pondered for a moment before revealing a helpless expression. She shook her head and said, I don't know why, but I have a strong desire for this black stone. The desire to obtain even more black stone has been lingering in my soul, and I can't get rid of it. I'm even certain that this black stone is very beneficial to my cultivation, far surpassing the effects of a divine stone. However, the information and memories I have regarding the black stone are a blur. End of chapter. Chapter 2498. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao discussed this matter for a long time. For 4 whole hours, the two racked their brains and racked their brains, but they were unable to obtain any more information. They only knew that black stone was produced in the Shenwu continent, and its effects far surpassed that of ordinary divine stones. They needed to find the source of the black stone and obtain even more in order to increase their strength as quickly as possible. Of course, Ji Tianqing also thought of something else. They could use the black stone to create even more powerful divine weapons. After dawn, Yin Yao left with a piece of black stone. She wanted to return to the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom and gather all the forces that could be used to investigate the source of the black stone. Ji Tianqing also had a piece of black stone, and he began to deploy his plan. He mobilized the forces of the Tianqing Divine Kingdom to search for clues about the black stone within its borders. As for Tianju Mountain and the 72 cities, they were left to Ji Ku to investigate. Their main targets of investigation were the miners who had been enslaved by the Heaven Punishers. Very quickly, 3 months passed. There was still no substantial progress in the investigation of the black stone. The divine guards and scouts of the 2 divine kingdoms, as well as the armies of the various empires, were still on the move. Ji Tianqing used the black stone in his hand to conduct thousands of experiments, and he managed to obtain many results. First, the black stone's hardness surpassed that of a mid-grade divine weapon. Even the Sword of Burial of Heaven could not leave a mark on it. If this item could be used to forge a divine weapon, it would definitely be very powerful. Second, the black stone contained a boundless amount of divine power. Even with Ji Tianqing's strength, it would take him 3 months to completely refine it. Once the black stone's divine power was exhausted, it would automatically recover, but the speed was shockingly slow. Third, the black stone contained spatial power that could help Ji Tianqing travel through space at will. It was not difficult for him to teleport 5,000 kilometers at a time. These experimental results allowed Ji Tianqing to gain a preliminary understanding of the black stone's powerful effects. His desire to obtain more black stone also became increasingly urgent. Unknowingly, half a year passed. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's subordinates investigated more than 3,000 cities and more than 80 million enslaved miners. Jiku had also traveled all over Tianju Mountain and the 72 cities to investigate millions of miners. Unfortunately, no one knew the origin and production of the Blackstone. However, there were some scattered pieces of information that were uncertain. After Ji Tianqing and the other two pieced together and analyzed, they finally came to a conclusion. The origin of the Black Stones was most likely within the Tianqing Kingdom. Although this conclusion was not necessarily reliable, there was no substantial evidence. However, Ji Tianqing did not want to miss any opportunity. With the mentality that he would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go, he used the killer move that he had been saving up for many years. He had sent out the Earth Spirits, who were the best at tunneling through the Earth and searching for and excavating mineral veins. The Earth Spirit race had been living and thriving in the sword world for many years. Now, they had expanded by more than 10 times and had a population of more than 60,000. Even the original peaceful Earth City had expanded by more than 10 times. The clan leader, Jinshan Wang, had passed the 9 tribulations and become a martial sage under Ji Tianqing's guidance. The guardian beast of the Earth Spirit race, the Xitigarbha godly armor that was good at tunneling, had also broken through to the martial sage realm. Ji Tianqing handed the important task of searching for the source of the black stones to Jinshan Wang. Jinshan Wang took the Xitigarbha godly armor and gathered 1,000 elites of the Earth Spirit race. They began to search within the Tianqing Kingdom. Of course, before Jinshan Wang set off, Ji Tianqing summoned him and the Xitigarbha godly armor. Ji Tianqing took out the black stones in front of them and asked them to study them carefully. He asked them to remember the appearance, characteristics, and aura of the black stones. In this way, they had a higher chance of finding the black stones. While the Earth Spirit race was searching for the black stones, Ji Tianqing's immortal guards and scouts continued to carry out their tasks. Yin Yao and Ji Ku did not stop searching either. Everyone believed that as long as they persevered, they would find clues sooner or later. At the same time, in the vast starry sky, a ball of dark red light wrapped around a black disk that was the size of a millstone. It was flying through the cold void. This black disk was General Long Fu's life-saving weapon, the Tether Sky Disk. Ever since they had escaped from the Five Elements realm, the Tether Sky Disk had been flying in the void for a year. In this year, General Long Fu had been in a deep sleep for half a year before his injuries recovered and he woke up. 3 months ago, he had contacted the captains under his command. More than 10 of the captains had been sacrificed, and they had successfully taken over a world. They were now enslaving the living beings of the various races and plundering their resources. General Long Fu was comforted when he heard this news. However, he did not go to that world to meet up with his subordinates. He controlled the Tether Sky Disk and continued to fly into the depths of the starry sky. His target was the center of the purple cloud star, the most dazzling purple cloud star. Marshal Nanjinan had led a large number of battleships to attack the purple cloud star. General Long Fu wanted to meet the marshal to report the situation. At that moment, in the depths of the starry sky in front of the Tether Sky Disk, there was an incomparably huge star that was quietly emitting a sacred and dazzling purple light. Compared to that purple star, the densely packed stars in the starry sky seemed small and dim. Inside the tether sky disk, General Long Fu stood in the desert and stared at the light screen in front of him. The light screen showed the scene of the starry sky. It was surrounded by a circle of silver light spots and a huge purple star in the middle. He looked at the purple star with a burning gaze, revealing a look of intense anticipation. The purple cloud star is indeed the core of the purple cloud star zone. It is the Emperor star that is above more than 300 worlds. It has been more than 40 years since the Marshal led his troops to attack the purple cloud star. I wonder if the Marshal has taken down the purple cloud star? At the thought of meeting the Marshal, General Long Fu felt excited and longing. Just as Yu had said, although he had not taken down the Five Elements realm, he had discovered a few secrets there. In particular, one of the secrets could even tempt the gods. As long as he truthfully reported these secrets to the Marshal, he would definitely be put in an important position and rewarded. Thinking of this, General Long Fu lowered his head and looked at his left hand. In the middle of his broad palm, a tiny black stone lay quietly. It looked ordinary. However, it was this seemingly ordinary black stone that contained an astonishing amount of divine power that saved his life. Boundless divine stone, not only did you save my life, but you will also become my opportunity to achieve a meteoric rise and become a true god. This time, I will make the Marshal see me in a different light and even win the Emperor's favor. I will definitely return to the Five Elements realm. General Long Fu muttered to himself. Then he put away the boundless divine stone and drove the tether sky disk to continue on his journey. Unknowingly, half a month passed. The tether sky disk crossed millions of miles of space and finally arrived near the purple cloud star. Even from hundreds of thousands of miles away, General Long Fu could see that there were densely packed black figures in the starry sky. They were releasing endless dark red light pillars that ruthlessly bombarded the purple cloud star.